Welcome to the Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories at the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey in Seeker, a partner of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Today is August 27th, 2018. I am Carol Fowler, Director of the Center. My honored veteran is retired Lieutenant Colonel John Occhipinti, who served in the United States Army from 1981 until 2003. He served with the 295th Military Police Company, the 511th Military Police Company, the 759th Military Police Battalion, the 188th Military Police Company, and the 728th Military Police Battalion in Korea, the 519th Military Battalion, as well as, did I leave anything else out as far as units?
As far as units, no.
Oh, okay, good. He is considered a Cold War veteran as well as the Honduras conflict veteran, 1986. And thank you for wanting to be here today. I can call you John?
Yes, please.
John, your eyewitness account is considered a primary historical source and a valuable contribution to the Veteran History Project. And I should also add that you are a Gulf War era veteran and defense of the Republic of Korea. Good morning, John, and welcome.
Good morning, Carol, and thank you very much.
Let's talk about how you heard about this project.
Through two relatives, an Uncle Frank Priest, who is a World War II veteran, Navy, and Ed Bushman, who's a Marine. Both are relatives on my stepmom's side, and both told me what a great job that you did, and I needed to get down here and to talk with you.
Wonderful. And now after you're interviewed, you'll become a great recruitment tool for the project as well. I really appreciate that. John, take me back to life prior to service. Had anyone in your family served?
Yes, my father was a Korean War era veteran, and my Uncle Sam served during World War II. Was very active as part of Patton's army. He did receive a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. Both were strong advocates of the military. Also, a few of my uncles served. I'm the first in the family to have made a career. Quite a few in my family did their time.
What was life like for you and your family prior to service? You're from Patterson?
Yes. Well, I had two great parents who, after a few years, couldn't, they kind of fell out of love together. So they did separate and eventually divorce when I was about 16. And, but both great folks, always took time for us. Dad was a fireman, Mom was a beautician, and hardworking people. We were, we weren't by any means rich. We were, paycheck to paycheck, but they made it work. They did a great job. I did like sports. I kept very busy with sports. I was very supported by both my folks. I played a lot of baseball in high school, and then college switched over just to football.
What did you go to college for?
I went to William Patterson, and I started off as a business major. Was not a very good student my first 2 years. In fact, my second year, I was ineligible to play football because of my grades, which was my best wake-up call ever, because it taught me to get in a high gear, take things a little seriously, which I did my junior and senior year, which is why I played 3 years at Willie P. As opposed to 4. And did not have a degree when I left William Patterson. I had about 100 credits, but I did finish my degree when I was an enlisted soldier.
How did you come to enlist in the Army, and why the Army?
Carol, that's a great question. I think I always knew, my father said this, my mother alluded to it, I always knew someday I was going to go in. I liked the idea of being a soldier. I worked a few years after college in my father's delivery service. As a fireman, they have the ability to do other sidelines. So he started the delivery service, which I worked in with him. And did that for a few years. Played a little semi-pro football. Actually had a free agent tryout with the Giants, where I probably had below zero chance of making it, but tried anyway.
What was your position?
I was a defensive back. I worked hard to be, I'd probably say I overachieved to be average, if that makes sense. But I did have a free agent tryout, and in 1980, and when I wasn't recalled to the Giant team, they left me with the semi-pro team up in practice at Palisades Park called the Lyndhurst Rams. After that, I decided it was time to go for my next goal in life, which was to join the military. So I enlisted in 1981.
What was happening in the country at the time?
Another great question. We were living through the Iran crisis, and I guess, I want to say it started in 1979, if I recall. But I remember making my deliveries as every week went by, and I remember having a radio on. And the people on the radio would say, day 100 of the hostage crisis, day 150, day 210. And it just bothered me. I guess that really put some roots. So that's when I decided it's time to do something. It's time for me to make a career move that I probably always knew I was going to. But that was the time that kind of jump-started me. So that's when I enlisted in the May time frame of 1981, 10 days after I got married.
And Fort McClellan was your first location?
Yes, as it used to be the home of the MP Corps. The recruiter put me on the train at the Newark train station, and 19 hours later, I found myself in Anniston, Alabama, and actually got a ride from a retired sergeant major from the train station to the fort, and that's when I went through basic training and advanced individual training.
Was it a culture shock, Alabama? North Jersey boy.
It was. I always try to keep things balanced, and I remember then by design just kind of going with everything and just going with as good an attitude as I could, but it was a bit of a culture shock.
You were a Yankee in the South.
Oh yeah, and I got to tell you, there were instances where I was reminded of that. Although it was funny, and I'll mention this later, my family and I, which it was just my wife and I at the time, and of course she wasn't down at basic training, but in later years my family and I got to feel very comfortable and very warm down in Alabama. We were treated as cousins, if you will, friendly cousins.
Well, that's good. And what kind of adjustment was it to go from civilian to military life? Sorry.
In some ways, not too much, and probably because of the sports background. There's a lot of discipline in sports.
Oh, right.
But in some ways it was. First time I ever slept in the field was in basic training. I never camped. First time I ever fired a weapon was in basic training. So there was a lot of new things for me, but Carol, I looked at it all as like an adventure. And really, my career in general was like a balance of things. And, the Lord watching over me had some harm's way, not as much as some, more than others. But it kind of was like, with my family, it kind of was like an adventure.
Okay. So it must have been hard to be away from your bride for 2 months?
Yeah, a couple months, sure, basic training. She did come down for graduation. Then she flew back up, and then during advanced individual training, she came down again. But yeah, it was, if I recall, it was about 3 months total.
Including AIT.
With AIT, yeah. And it was, Carol, it wasn't, we were only married 10 days.
Oh, gosh.
But we still had been together for a couple of years. So, her, my folks, my family, the way I did things up here, it was a bit of an adjustment.
You put trainee of the platoon in basic training?
Yes, I was fortunate to have been selected the trainee of the platoon, and that's I guess a competition amongst the folks in the platoon, and they looked at things, PT, all the things we went through, leadership, the way you did in the field, and Carol, I got to tell you, I was very fortunate, and I got to tell you, I really appreciated that. Even now, after all these years, that is special to me.
The first recognition that you got in the military for
First recognition.
being outstanding.
That's very first, and it was very special.
And platoon sergeant, platoon guide. I never heard of platoon guide.
Yeah, I guess it used to be a term, and I don't know if it's used anymore. It's platoon sergeant. You do wear the 3-stripe as a sergeant stripe over your arm. It's like an MP brassard. Well, they have the striped brassards, and it was my first opportunity also at leadership, formal type of leadership.
So that, I can imagine, instilled confidence in you as a young person.
It did. Now, when I was in basic, Carol, I went in a little older than some. I was 25 when I started, and I thought I'd be by far the old man, but it wasn't really the case. There were a few fellows older than me, and many about my age. So I probably was about in the top 30% age-wise. So I wasn't as old as I thought I'd be, but I was given a lot of confidence from the drill sergeants. Carol, their job isn't to be friends. And they made that very clear, especially when we got off, the famous getting off the bus. When you meet the big sergeant, Sergeant Johnson. I remember Sergeant Johnson because he was very large and quite frightening. And I remember coming from Patterson and being in good shape at the time, and nobody was going to bother me and nobody was going to intimidate me. And I got off the bus and he just glared, probably because I was a little more muscular than the average guy or gal. And he made a point to just give me the look. And I remember saying deep inside, I sure hope I don't have to fight that guy, because he was 6'7" or so, about 280 in muscle, and the other drill sergeant we had, Sergeant Starling, was thin and hard, looked like tempered steel. But as the weeks went by, it seemed like they had a confidence in me, and they would give me missions and things to do, overseeing the troops. And I could see they had confidence in me. And another very special thing, when I graduated AIT, because it's a one-stop, so I had them through all of it, they actually got together and wrote a letter that the company commander signed for me to go to OCS. And that's another special thing for me, that the drill sergeants thought that highly. And I guess it should happen. At first I was very leery of them. By the end I loved them. And even more than the end, it didn't happen right at the end. It happened probably about halfway through. I saw their training was just to make us better. They're all Vietnam vets, and they had been through the tough, and they wanted to make sure that we could handle the tough.
That's a good point. And did they share anything with you about Vietnam?
Yes. I remember Sergeant Johnson just very briefly told me, and I don't think it was all of us, I think it was me, maybe one other person, how he remembered being on guard duty one night as a military policeman, and just remember looking out at the darkness and eyes really wide open and just watching for anything. And Sergeant Starling, the thinner gentleman, actually, what we were told, not by him but by the other drill sergeants, that I think he was an infantryman during Vietnam, and he was quite effective. He was quite the hero, but he didn't tell us any stories.
So moving on, your first duty station was Seneca Army Depot?
Yes, that's up in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. Just my wife and I. Beautiful, snowy, cold. We actually were talking about this at dinner the other night, and it was a wonderful experience. The only thing missing was we didn't have our either child It's before they were born. But the experience was amazing. We Fran and I were like kind of big fish in a small pond. Initially, because I had college, I was a PFC. So initially I came in sharp, and many of the people in my platoon weren't so as serious about their profession as I was. And it was almost like I was a little bit of an outcast. But I didn't want to force my way in, and I didn't want to force any friendship, so I just kind of went about my business. And little by little, the guys all kind of came around. And I think when it changed was during football season. We had flag football. And after, the guys found out that I played. So after one game, they named me the captain. And we all just got close. And it's the camaraderie, it's the friendship, and it just took hold. And I guess the guys all respected me kind of where I was coming from, and I respected all them. I realized then, Carol, not every soldier is coming in to be the next Audie Murphy. All the guys and gals are just regular folks coming in for different reasons. Some of them are class clowns, some of them are quiet, some of them are louder. But, when you mesh, it's really a beautiful thing. And it did happen, and it was a very special time up there. I was another time I was fortunate. After 1 month, my platoon sergeant put me in for the Soldier of the Month competition, and I won. And again, I just felt very, very proud. And to my surprise, my platoon mates, who kind of were, as I said, not as serious about it, they all got into it. They thought it was really, really cool that one of their platoon mates won the Soldier of the Month. And so it just took on a great life of its own.
So sounds like it was inspiring. I had just said that you were probably inspiring to your buddies from your platoon, your unit, for having made Soldier of the Month.
I think so. I'd like to believe that, and it did seem that way. It really was a cool thing. The platoon leader, platoon sergeant, they take that very serious, and they were very excited. But I was really inspired by the way the group, the guys and the gals, came up and hey John, that's really cool. That's really cool. And remember, I was a little older than the average private, so I kind of was almost fitting in as a sergeant, even though I was a PFC. So it was a very warm and very good experience. I will tell you that I learned an awful lot those couple years that I was enlisted, and that time enlisted really helped me for when I became an officer. Great experience, great interaction with the sergeants, great interaction with the troops, and just a great learning.
That's a good segue into my next question. You were selected for OCS.
I have a story if you'd like.
Of course.
When I went for my OCS board, here I am, in my mind, high speed, Soldier of the Month a couple months ago, college, I can do anything. I'm going to waltz my way through the board. And I went in hands on knees, looking them in the eye, answering the question very well. And then one of the lieutenants, one of the people on the board, there were 3 people. One of them asked me a question which was, I guess, a gotcha. I know that now. I didn't know it then. So I took offense at the question, and it was, do you know any of the people in your platoon? I go, sure. Who are they? So I told them a few, and they said, well, you're close? Yep. So what would you do after you get commissioned if you get sent back here? You can't fraternize with them. And I said, well, I'm sure we can make that work. They're all professionals. So no, you won't be able to talk to him, you won't be able to have lunch with them. And he kept pressing me to the point where he probably got what he wasn't expecting, and I got a little nasty with him during the OCS board, which, Carol, is not career enhancing. And I realized that. And there's an expression in the Army, at certain times you fall on your sword. I fell on my sword. And I dropped my hands from my knees. I got very casual. And I guess the street started coming out in me. And then he took a different approach, and the other ones did. And they were asking me gotcha questions, and I was answering just from my heart. Like, well, if your commander told you to take a hill that way, but you know taking it another way will save lives, what would you do? And so I'll take it the way I know will save lives. If it's my commander's way, great. If not, I'll take it. But you could get court-martialed. I said, well, I'll take that chance. So I was answering them probably not in the way they were expecting. So when I was done, I saluted and walked out, knowing full well I not only was not going to OCS, I might get in trouble with my commander. I thought he might, call me in. So I told my wife when I got home, said, well, we'll forget about OCS. But I still love the Army. I'm enjoying this, so we'll ride it out and see what happens. And a few weeks later, I was walking into the day room, and the officer from the board saw me. And I saw who he was, and he saw me. He came over and said, hey, I was a specialist at the time. He goes, how are you? I go, I'm okay, like he was my long-lost friend. He said, congratulations. So I had no idea what he was talking about. He brought me into a room. He said, you probably don't know this yet, so I'm going to break the news, but don't tell anyone. He said, you're going OCS, and you're going quick. So I went from wanting to strangle him to want to hug him. And he saw a big smile come across my face, and he was very, very, almost like a good cousin, an older cousin. And he said, listen, I said, I didn't think I was going to get selected after, how it ended up. He said, we didn't either. He said, but after you left, we talked. And we said, you know what, if this guy is genuine, and if he learns, in officer school, which he will, he could be a really good officer. And he told me this. And I'm at this point now, I'm glowing. I'm having emotions I don't normally have. And he just said one thing. He said, one bit of advice. He said, try to balance your confidence and your decisiveness with some deep breath moments. He said, get a little polish, and you'll do, he said, you really do good. And he could have said, go jump off a bridge, and I would have said, yes, Lieutenant, I'll be happy. And it really was, he doesn't realize this, and I don't even know where he is. He doesn't realize that was probably the best advice I could have ever gotten. Don't forget who you are, but don't go out and try to fight everyone you meet. Don't try to fire every bullet. He goes, because you won't have any for the real battle. Be smart. Think about what you're doing. And it was great advice. And I went home. I don't think my feet hit the ground when I left the room. I floated home, told my wife, we got excited. And it was just a couple of short months after that, I was in the class. And which was surprising, because we're told it normally takes 12 to 18 months after you find out you've been selected. That's what we were told up in Seneca. And I went within a couple months, so it was a wonderful experience.
Is that where OCS was?
No,
Fort Benning?
Down in Fort Benning, Georgia. That was my next adventure. Carol, OCS is something that I'm so proud I did, and I never want to do again. It was very tough. They were very, very hard on us, very cold. The training was amazing. They kept us in high pressure all the time, and while they did it, they expected us to be ladies and gentlemen. So it was quite the dichotomy of training, and it was a great experience.
Okay. You were the class PT officer?
Yes. Another fun story. At the end of the first week, we had a battalion run. That's where the entire company runs with the battalion commander, all the TAC officers. And the day before, they took me on a recon. And I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea. And I had to be up in front leading the run with the real company commander. And I botched it up. I ran us into a bowling alley parking lot. I was making wrong turns, getting yelled at the whole time, but just kept prodding along. Said, this is the wrong turn. I said, okay, this looks right. I botched up the first battalion run tremendously. So the company commander had to take over, and he ran us back to where we had to go. And while we were doing our stretches after the run, the TAC officers were coming by telling me, throwing commands at me, saying, do PT drill 6, exercise 4. I had no idea what they wanted me to do. So I would go to the push-ups, or I'd go to the side straddle hop, or I'd go to exercises I knew, knowing they were wrong, but I didn't want to stand there and just
Right.
continually get yelled at. So finally, excuse me, the senior TAC officer comes by, and with his arms folded, looks at me with disgust, and he goes, "Candidate, beat your face." So I squinted my eyes and looked at him. Not to be mean, I didn't know what he wanted. So he goes, "Don't you look at me like that." I said, "Beat your face." And 180, 200, over 200 of my classmates are staring at me. All the officers, battalion commander, the brigade commander, I don't know what he wants me to do. He said, I said, "Beat your face." So I said to myself, this little man is getting really mad, so I better do something. So I made a fist and I punched myself in the face. And he got even more mad. He said, "I mean, do push-ups." And he started laughing. He couldn't hold his laughter. So he thought I was kidding. And my classmates, it broke all the tension of the first week, the fear of the first week. People were laughing, they never laughed. Guys and gals were smiling, they relaxed, and they thought I kind of did it to be a class clown. So while I'm down on the ground doing push-ups, I got a big smile, and they're like all like thanking me because everyone now is relaxing. And I had no idea what he wanted me to do. So it became like a legend of that class. And it almost elevated me to where, again, I thought I was going to be booted for not knowing what the heck I was doing. It was like they thought it was a cool thing. But again, learning from my experiences, my mistakes, I never let it happen again. So at night when lights were out, I would hide under my covers. My roommate would do the same thing. My bunkmate, he was on the bottom, I was on top. I would, with a flashlight, be reading not only the things we needed for the next day, but I would be reading the PT manual, the marching manual, every manual. And I became a semi-expert on all of it. So weeks later, a couple days before we were getting ready to come home for Christmas break, because we were the Christmas break cycle, we were doing evening PT. And the actual class, the student company commander, was up front, and the company commander is yelling commands at this poor guy and telling him, do this, do that, and he's botching it. We all botched things up. We didn't know what we were doing half the time. But they want to see, I guess, how you handle the pressure. And evidently, they thought I handled the pressure really well because I didn't crack. I kept, if anything, a sense of humor. But they're making the class company commander, they're giving him fits. So the company commander, we're all in different directions. The company commander goes, "Somebody better come up here and take this, because I'm not getting you out of this now. We'll stay up here all night if we have to." So all the students are looking at each other, just hoping, someone has to go unravel this. But it's funny, I was waiting for him. I read this in the marching manual, and I knew exactly how to get us out of it. So I looked around to see if anyone else wanted it, and I backed out and ran to the front. And the leadership, the TAC officers, were stunned that a student even got up and ran to the front. So I said to him, "Connor, I got it." He goes, "Ock, thank you so much. Thank you." And he ran to the back. And I did it by the numbers, and I uncorked us, and I started marching us back, and I knew it was right. So what I started doing was I didn't want to listen for further commands. I started saying double time, and I wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. And the actual company commander stopped me. He said, "Stop this formation." And he goes, come up to where I am. Now, Carol, we had to always be have in our pocket a little pad and a pen, because they wanted us to write down demerits. They wanted to like humiliate you on the spot. Write this down, and then later go work with your demerits. The company commander goes, "Get your pad out and your pen." He goes, "Give yourself 3 merits." He goes, "That was perfect. And you're the first student that's ever done it." So my classmates start clapping, made you feel good. I got up front, and I think I sprinted us back. Again, it was just guys and gals were coming by my room. And that was pretty cool. So it was very close to being probably not even making it the couple weeks before, to this where Now I'm like a local expert. And then everything went from there. And the last fun thing with OCS was, just before graduation, my TAC officer called me in. He said, I'm not supposed to do this. He said, but I'm going to tell you something. You're not only going to graduate, they never should tell you that. He said, but you're going to be an honor graduate. So I was, again, stunned. And my TAC officer was quite theatrical, very aggressive, very scary, very loud. So I said, why do you say that, sir? He goes, well, for two reasons. Number one, we couldn't rattle you, and we all saw that. And he said, number two, when we saw you punch yourself in the face, they said we were all kind of a little scared. So he made me laugh, and I think it was the first time I laughed alone in his office. And I did graduate. I did become an honor graduate.
Congratulations.
So thank you. And it just, again, it was, listen, it was God sending a couple of guardian angels. It was having a lot of good classmates around me. And just, you know, some of the things like your folks tell you when you're younger. Do something. Any decision's better than no decision. So, you know. And I just didn't want to get, I didn't want them to think they'd get to me. I kept that all inside. Of course they did, but I just didn't show it. So it all kind of worked out. So OCS was a very tough experience, but for me a very, very good, positive experience.
And after OCS, you graduated from the Military Police Officers Basic Course back at Fort McClellan.
Yes.
Okay. And the U.S. Army Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia. Do you have any stories from that?
From
Airborne?
Airborne? Yes, just one brief one. The only story, Carol, is I did Airborne mainly because I don't like heights. And I was at the point in my life, 26, 27, you know, I'm an officer now, I'm a soldier, prior football player, you know, nothing scares me. So I said, well, I'm going to go to Airborne School. I want to do that. Well, the funny thing is I did it, but I'm still afraid of heights. But I did it to kind of get over fear of heights. Plus I did it for the training. It's good training to have airborne. 3 weeks of airborne training is very tough. Even though OCS prepared you. We were in great shape. Really not much they could do. I did one day, I had a sergeant who I guess maybe thought, you know, second lieutenant, you know, we like to get the officers, you know. So he's, of course, airborne sergeant. Now, I respected them immensely, but they didn't have a lot of respect for the new lieutenants. So one day I was really getting dogged really bad. And you had to do 10 things straight. You had to go across on a rope, and when he tells you to drop, you got to do a perfect landing. Hit with your, bend your knees, ankles together, roll, and they can fail you for anything. And he'd let me get up to about 7 or 8, go back and do it again. Get up to about 9, go back and do it again. He kept dogging me and dogging me. So finally, it was just me and him. Everyone else was getting a drink. He goes, hey, Lieutenant, that's enough. I said, no, I'm doing all 10. You can't. You'll get tired before I do. Again, probably not the wisest thing to do. Patter the street coming out of me. And he goes, no, Lieutenant, okay. All right, you made your point. You know, so we both made our point. His point was, I could dog the lieutenant, and my point was, I'm not going to let you dog me. You could kill me, but you ain't going to do it. Again, probably not the smartest thing to do at the time, but I enjoyed it.
And then you were assigned Fort Dix from 83 to 86?
Yes, that was a very special time. One of the 3 great moments for me, besides my military career, was the day I married Fran, and the day my son was born, November of 1983, the day my daughter was born, December 1987. So Fort Dix was great. My wife and I pulled up the very first day. I was supposed to be a training officer. Now I want to be very gentle how I say this. Being a training officer in a training brigade is a great job. But I wanted to be a tactical officer. There used to be the 759th MP Battalion out Fort Dix. And I heard about it. And that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a member of the 511th MP Company, 759th. But they had orders for me to be a training officer. So the first day I told a friend, we're going to make a detour before I have to sign in. I went to the post personnel center. I told them what it was, and I said, listen, I'd like to switch. They thought I was kidding, because I said most people want to switch to get out of the 759th.
Why is that?
Well, because it's a tactical unit. The trainee units are great, but the drill sergeants really do the majority of the leading and the training officer, they do more administration, which is great, and we all need that. But I wanted to be in the tactical unit. So they easily switched me. They said that's a switch that nobody, So I did that, and then I went to check in at the 759th, and it was quite the show. They're yelling and screaming, and people were frightened of the battalion commander, and the sergeants are raising hell, and that's really kind of what I was. That's kind of what I was looking for. Sometimes the expression, "Be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it." Well, that's
That
what
is
happened.
what you wanted.
But it is exactly what I wanted, and it was the best move I ever made. I was fully supported by my wife, who knew time would, I'd be in the field more than I would have been,
Right.
but probably deploy and things like that. But she knew that was what I was about, and that's what I wanted.
Because you didn't do all this just to have a desk job. You wanted to use what you had learned.
You put it perfectly. That's exactly it. I figured there would be a time for a desk job, and quite frankly, I wanted one. Not now. I had the energy, the training, the youth. Remember, I was an older lieutenant than the average officer, so that's what I wanted, and I did get that. I got some wonderful experience. The soldiers I fortunate enough to command were amazing. They weren't too good when I got there.
Interesting.
The battalion commander was quite the frightening gentleman, Colonel Joe Jenkins.
I love how you know all the names still.
Some of them.
Oh, okay.
Some of them, but thank you for that. Colonel Jenkins wanted to meet with me early on, and he was mad at me already. And this is all part of the adventure, and I got to tell you, I loved it. See, I said, yeah, that's what he's supposed to be. So he was just mad as heck at me. And he goes, your platoon is the worst in the company, maybe the battalion. He said, your platoon leader should be shot for impersonating an officer. Your platoon sergeant should go to jail. He said, they're terrible. They failed their RTEP last year. That's the annual training event that lets you know if you're combat ready. And you really can't fail those. If you fail those, you're in bad shape. So it was quite the first day. And I just said, yes, sir, I'll do my best. And he was just mad at me. I don't think he returned my salute. It was great. And so I met my platoon. In fact, I met them on the runway at McGuire Air Force Base. If you recall Grenada, I know
yes.
I know these things I mentioned. You could tell me about them.
Manuel Noriega.
So we were supposed to deploy there. I met my platoon on the runway at McGuire Air Force Base because we were alerted. We were waiting for the green to go. And there was a lot of panic. There was a lot of, normal. There was a lot of adrenaline, a lot of uncertainty. But the battalion commander was pushing for us to go. He was a Vietnam vet. He was an infantryman during Vietnam, switched to MP. And he just said, my MPs need combat experience. So my philosophy was, well, I don't necessarily want to push to go, but I also don't, if we got this way we train. This is what we're here for. So I calmed him down. My platoon sergeant, probably more than anybody, which surprised me. Which very much surprised me because I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with incredible sergeants. People that just amazing. Well, this guy wasn't one of them. He was a nice guy, and he probably was a good person, but I was hoping I could lean on the platoon sergeant in the beginning. Well, I didn't get that, which was okay. So we were stood down. We didn't have to go for the combat mission. My platoon went later for the police action. But we did not have to go. And the first thing I did, Carol, was I was on a one-man wrecking crew to get the platoon up to speed. I got rid of that platoon sergeant. And then I got a new one. He wasn't all too much better. He was more of a cop than a soldier. He never really did any field time. But I had some good squad leaders. And the squad leaders were like they always wanted to flex their muscles in soldier. So they liked when I came in. A couple of the soldiers didn't like it because I made them do PT very hard. I trained my MPs like we were Rangers by design. I felt if we're going to be with supporting the maneuver element, we got to be as ready as them. So I brought in a new energy, and I kept them in the field longer than they expected, and I did things like that. And it was a few short weeks before they got it. And I guess initially I probably wouldn't have been voted in as mayor if I ran, but after a few weeks, it became an understanding, and then it became a love affair. I'm going to try not to get emotional, because I can get emotional talking about my family and about my troops. And they were good men. And I only had a couple ladies, but a couple really good, strong women. And they, after I helped them, remind them of their responsibilities, they then turned and made me much better than I was. And it was a love fest. So,
During this time, your platoon and you captured 2 wanted felons?
yes, that was, we were told that there were a rash of crime, robberies, break-ins, throughout the area. I mean, as far as Trenton, Hamilton Township, all the areas. And so finally, it was around the February timeframe, my commander called me in and said, your platoon will be going on stakeout. Now, we're soldiers. We shouldn't use terms like stakeout. But I knew what she meant. So I had to spread my platoon out from 11 at night to 7 in the morning throughout Fort Dix, hiding in places, waiting to catch these people. Now, she said, in all honesty, we doubt they're going to be brazen enough to come to a military base. We're doing this because we're ordered to do it, Lieutenant. So, because I said, I'll tell you what.
Ordered by who?
I'm guessing the Provost Marshal, who may be with the local police, because we did a lot with local police. With state troopers, I got to know many of the state troopers. They used to have a barracks right outside Fort Dix. In fact, the building is still there. I think it's their K-9 now. But I had experience with state troopers, very positive experiences. So I told my commander, who I really liked, and she really liked me. But I think she felt at times she had to put the brakes on me, which was good. It was a good balance, which, again, the balance is what I needed and I grew from. So I told her, I said, ma'am, rest assured, we're going to get him. And she's like, Lieutenant, listen, I know, just do your job. And she reminded me, now you can't be with them. See, because the officers, when we were given to the Provost Marshal office, the officers were supposed to give the troops, and we were supposed to work during the day with the company, doing details. Arms room, mess hall, things like that. We all had additional duties. So I said, man, with all due respect, I'll be there during the day, but I'm going to be with the troops. And I did that. I had about 4 hours sleep. I worked during the day, a couple hours sleep, 7 to 11, kissed Eddie, kissed Franny, and then was with the troops. The 4th night, my wife had a wedding. One of her cousins got married. So we went up for the wedding, came back just in time for me to get into my BDUs, and I couldn't have a weapon because I wasn't supposed to be on. So I had my nightstick. So me and my platoon sergeant drove around in my car, because again, I wasn't supposed to be working, and we had my radio, my handheld. And one of my soldiers, Robert Brandenberry, gets on the radio and says, whispering, there's someone in the gym. He was in the gym. So platoon sergeant and I go in. We find the door ajar. We go into the gym, and we go into the bathroom, and it's all pitch black. But we see my guy, a little light from the window, and my soldier was kneeling on top of one guy with his weapon drawn, and another guy was behind him, and it was hard to see, it was dark, but it looked like he had a weapon drawn on my guy. So my guy looked at us and just said, "Sir, help." So I dove, smart or not, I dove towards them. I just kind of jumped at them. And the effect I wanted took over. The guy got scared and he ran. So that was good. So me and the platoon sergeant, oh, by the way, was a new platoon sergeant, a very good one, and improved, Steve Shepard, who was a tactical MP his whole career. He had very little police time. He was an old soldier, field soldier. We got along very well. So me and Sergeant Shepard jump in, we help Brandon Berry, we cuff this guy. Now we got one. So I take over, I take the radio, I call the desk. Mind you, I'm not supposed to be there. But I say, Desk Sergeant, Lieutenant O, block off Fort Dix, send patrols to any, you know if you've been to Fort Dix. It's almost impossible to close it off, but we did. We just had people all over blocking the roads. Now we got a manhunt, because we know there's at least one more out there. About 2 or 3 in the morning, a soldier from the Provost Marshal office, the dog handler, gets on the radio and he calls me. He said, "LT, I think I see something." So we go over. I direct my MPs to create a perimeter, but far back. One person was down the road to the left, to the right, one by the wood line, and then we came up. And I low crawled to the car in question. And I looked inside and I saw there was a guy in there. So I low crawled back and I said, "Hey, Sergeant Shepard, that's him." Sergeant Shepard grabbed me by the shirt, used a few words which I can't use during the interview, and he said, "Don't you ever do that again." I said, "No, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing." So we got on the bullhorn, my sergeants took over, and the guy made a mad dash for the woods. He never saw us. And it's about 7 of us jumped on him. Now we have 2. So we open the trunk in the car, we get the keys, and we hit a gold mine. It was loaded with stolen stuff, money, drugs, lots of drugs. And we figured, that's them. This wasn't just a lucky, so we brought him back. Now the captain who works the PMO and the lieutenant colonel who runs that, they show up at the police station, and I think their colonel liked me and my guys. Shook our hands, and listen now, but you guys have to go back now. You know, this is our stuff now. I said, "Of course. I'm just happy we didn't get shot." So it was like when I went out and saw the guys, they looked like they won the Super Bowl. They're high-fiving and so I go in the next day, Carol, and again it was a feeling of elation. We did it. We did it. We didn't realize the magnitude of how big. We didn't realize how much they were kind of terrorizing local areas. We were just worried about Fort Dix. We just didn't know. So I go in to see my commander, and I wanted to tell her I want these soldiers have to get medals. So I went in with a big smile, and she was mad. The first sergeant had his arms folded behind her. And the first sergeant and I we became very close. Elliot Marco is one of my heroes. A Vietnam veteran, double Bronze Star winner, great soldier, we became very close. He's looking at me real stern, and she's mad. I go, "I want these 7, I think it was 7 they deserve medals." She goes, "But you're not getting one." Oh, I said, "Ma'am," she goes, "You weren't supposed to be there. You shouldn't have been doing that." So I said, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, I understand. I understand." So I walked out the room, the first sergeant met me, put his arm around me, he said, "She had to do that. She's really happy, but she said she had to do that. But you ain't getting a medal because you're so smooth." I said, "If my soldiers get medals, that's my medal." So, but the funny thing was, I think it was the following year, almost to the month, I was fortunate, and I was Fort Dix's company grade officer of the year. And it was quite the outstanding honor. And I believe that is one of the things that fed that award. But going back to my soldiers, the reason I was selected to be the Officer of the Year, I had really good soldiers. And as I said earlier, they truly made me much better than I was. They got behind everything we did. And when I saw them perform, when we got these bad guys, I knew I had the real deal in there. I knew they just had to be unleashed. And so their performance, a few months later, we had to go down to APO, Virginia for our evaluation that the unit flunked the year before. So there was a lot of pressure on us to not flunk again. And the Colonel Jenkins, the very scary gentleman, he put the order out. He had found out that the 759th was going to backfill now the Grenada mission, police action. You remember after the couple week of fighting, there was a police action. We had troops there for a while. So he put out the edict that whichever platoon did the best during the RTEP was going to go down to Grenada. And my troops were magnificent. And I don't like to use too many flowery words. They were incredible. And we did really well. And we won the first platoon to go, the platoon to go. And it was actually said during the evaluation in front of our little world, the battalion commander, company commander, all the platoon leaders, all the NCO, all the sergeants, all the leadership, and all the evaluators on the other side. And they went mission by mission, and like the proud uncle, I was like, first platoon, first platoon, first platoon. So they actually announced it in front of everyone, and Colonel Jenkins, I think, actually smiled. And I think that scared everyone more than anything. So we had felt we won the Super Bowl. So it was a great experience. It was met by a little bit of a bad experience. While we were cleaning our gear, getting ready to come back, a couple of my soldiers, a vehicle, when they were going to get it washed, tipped over. They had the Jeep with the trailer, and they hit a little bit of a piece in the road.
Where was that?
This was at APO, Virginia.
Oh.
And the road, it's gravel, but then it goes to dirt. So if you're not careful, and the bad thing is with the Jeep, when you got the trailer, if the Jeep starts going side to side, the trailer could go the other way. And that's what happened. So they flipped over. But luckily we had the M60 machine gun mount in the Jeep, so it saved them from being crushed. So I went into the clinic there and checked out my troops, and they were frightened that I was going to be mad at them, and I absolutely wasn't. I knew they weren't horsing around. I knew it happened. And they were okay. But what it did, Carol, another good life lesson, I kind of got indoctrinated there. Don't celebrate, don't get excited till you're all the way back. You've dropped all your equipment, you've had your first shower, you've had your first meal, you've taken a deep breath, because we were all just so amped up for how well they did. They could have just lost a little focus. So it was a great experience, and it did end well. They were both okay. But it was probably a good thing to happen, because we all learned from it. We all learned, okay, look, and every time we went to the field after that, we made it a thing. Don't get excited till you're all the way back in your bed, your barracks, your bunk, your quarters, and you've relaxed. You're all the way back down to normal.
So what did you mention about the Grenada police action?
Yes.
Okay, John. You graduated Master Fitness Trainers course at Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana.
Right. Yeah, that was, I think it was the February of '84. 4 months of physical training, and I loved it. I was fortunate enough, again, I was in good shape then. I could do lots of push-ups, but I could also do lots of sit-ups, and I could run well. And I won the most fit award. It was a very, very good course. It gave me a lot of good skills for future units, for training the troops.
And I did jump ahead. Before our break, we were going to speak about the Grenada police action. Sorry.
So when we got back from AP Hill, Virginia, from the RTEP, all excited, all fired up, I was immediately called into my executive officer, a gentleman who I've served with a few times, who I'm close with, who my wife used to say had a love-hate relationship with. We loved each other, but we would bang heads. He was my executive officer, and his name was Lieutenant Colonel, he was Major at the time, John F. Bilbo. Very large gentleman, very good soldier. And he called me in. And this was, again, he was supposed to be the augment of the Colonel Jenkins. We had two fire breathers. They were both loud, very aggressive. Again, I liked it, but it was quite the experience. So he calls me in and says, you're being diverted. You're not going with your platoon. Lieutenant Butler's taking your platoon to Grenada. And that was probably the first time me and we had that closed door where he not only yelled at me, I yelled at him harder. And I was livid. I almost couldn't see straight. And he said, you don't understand. There's a better mission. You're needed to take 9 of the MPs from our battalion in 2 Cock V's. Those are the suburban vehicles. They're Suburbans, but they're camouflage. Drive from Fort Dix, New Jersey to Fort McClellan, Alabama. Try out for an all-Army MP team and compete in a military-wide, actually an international-wide competition. He said, I'm sorry that it interferes with your platoon going to Grenada, but we have selected you. So it was a very nice gesture. I mean, obviously they thought highly of me, but just as much, my troops are going somewhere. I got to be with them. So, well, of course, after I gave him my opinion, he then turned around and gave me back my opinion, which I saluted after I got it all out of my system, and I left, and then I took it on. And luckily, when we got down to Fort McClellan, me and I want to say 3 others from our battalion, maybe 4 others, made the team and competed in an Air Force competition with 15 Air Force teams, 1 British team, 1 Marine team, and us. The Army only entered this 2 years. They entered in 83 and 84, and I was fortunate enough. As an officer, you can only make 1 position. You either make it as the team leader, or you don't make it. So I competed against a bunch of officers and senior NCOs, Sergeant First Class and above. They all went for the team leader position. And I was fortunate, very, very tight competition, good folks, every one of them. Well, I was fortunate to just nudge out a couple of the guys. And it was a 2.5-month trip, which went from Fort McClellan to Air Assault School at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They threw that in as a benefit for making the team. That was like, because I would have never got Air Assault School. I'm a graduate of the Army Air Assault School because of making this team. And what was such a highlight with that, my wife and son and my dad and stepmom both came and spent the second week there, and they were there for my graduation. So although my son was very young at the time, he was there with my wife Fran and dad and stepmom.
Fort Carson, Colorado?
No, that was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That was on the way. So after we go to Fort Campbell, then we drive in 2 vans with 10 men. They were all guys. 10 men, our gear, our weapons, and everything we needed, with 2 vans. We went from Fort McClellan to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where our assault school was, then back on the road to Fort Carson, Colorado for 30 days, where we did intense high altitude training Then we headed south to Kirtland Air Force Base, to Mexico for the 8-day competition. And it was an amazing, amazing competition. The 2.5 months, except for the fact that my family wasn't there with me, although they were there at Air Assault School, but except for the fact that they couldn't be with me, and except for the fact that I wasn't with my troops in Grenada, it was the experience of a lifetime. And the major was right when he said, this is more important to the unit, to the Army, for the MP Corps, this is important. So I got over my anger, and we were all actually, and that, Carol, I think was also one of the things that fed my fortune of being selected for the Officer of the Year. These were all things, the RTEP, the Peacekeeper team capturing the bad guys, the group going from pretty bad to really spectacular. But again, now, one thing I didn't mention, one of the gentlemen that made the team was actually one of my platoon mates. He was in my platoon, and he's actually the guy who helped us capture the 2 bad guys. It's Robert Brandenberry. So that, again, that's kind of special. My daughter, through the however you can find people, Facebook or whatever, she actually tracked him down when we were in Florida a couple years ago. And we actually went back and forth on email for the first time since we left each other in 1985 or 86.
That's terrific.
And that was terrific. That was...
To have a reunion. You saw each other or not?
We didn't see each other.
Oh, you spoke.
But we spoke. We're going to do it the next time we go down. But we did the email thing.
Good.
Back and forth. Yeah, it was special.
I'm thinking that you were about 29 years old when you had that experience.
That's about right, yes.
Did your platoon make out okay in Grenada?
Everything went great. And that was the good thing is it was the police action. There was no, even though during the police action, it can be just as harrowing.
Right.
But they all did great. No incidents. Nothing that I ever heard of came. Nothing bad came of that. So everything kind of had a good closing, if you will, for that chapter.
One other location we skipped over, Fort Eustis, Virginia.
Yes, I was a few weeks. I attended the Strategic Mobility Planners course. And that was a good piece of training because we're a tactical unit. And we had to be trained in going somewhere by plane, train, even though very rare about train, but we learned vehicle. We had to learn how to load up everything.
Okay. And now you're a first lieutenant as of Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Yes, Carol, I'm glad you reminded me of that. When I got my air assault wings pinned, actually I was taken to the side by my major. I mentioned the major who diverted me. He also, I failed to mention this, Major B also came to Fort Campbell, Kentucky for that, and he surprised me by pinning on my first lieutenant. So dad, stepmom, wife, son, we were all able, and my platoon, my soldier, we were able to kind of enjoy that.
That's good.
Yeah.
You were the Fort Dix Baseball Little League president?
I did. I was the president one year, and the next year I was the league commissioner. Through the battalion, they always come out with things if you can support. And look, my son was so little, I had a chance to see him, but he'd be sleeping a lot, and my wife would be busy. So it was a way I could do something and combine time with them. They could come to the games that I was, either thrown out, starting the game off or whatever. So yeah, it was a good thing to help out with. So I very happily joined in and helped.
And you were the coach for the battalion and brigade track team?
That was a Colonel Jenkins special. That's a little more involving than the baseball. When I got back, I'm wrong. It was prior to us going on our RTEP. I was brought in by Colonel Jenkins and said, we're going to win the track, the brigade track and the post-track tournaments. And he said, you're going to be our coach. So I smiled and said, Colonel, I was a football player. I don't know anything about track. So this is almost a semi-quote. He said, then go to the library and get two, not one, two books on track and read them and be at track practice tomorrow. So we had track practice. Colonel Jenkins he made all the company commanders get their soldiers out there. And I got the best of them. I tried them out. And I just kind of did it like football practice. We just did it hard. We went for as long as I felt we had to. And we won the brigade open and the fort open. So it was a great experience. Again, it was something I can combine. My son and wife came out for. A funny thing happened. The colonel actually frightened many people. My wife brought Eddie, and I was walking around. I saw we were comfortably in the lead, so I was walking around with my son, holding my son. And the colonel saw me, and he was like a child. He was so happy. So he came by and he took my son, and he started parading around with my son. He was so happy. And some of the other wives were getting afraid because they never saw him show that kind of emotion. It was a good day for everybody. We had a lot of fun.
And when you took over your platoon, you were informed that both your company and battalion commanders, your platoon was, oh, we already covered that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we had some trouble, but with the help of a bunch of great NCOs and the first sergeant who was always in my corner, we became friends. He helped us become, the group was good. My platoon, I can proudly say, my platoon could do it all. And quite frankly, they did.
You transformed them into the best in the company.
Yeah, and that was a nice thing, was actually on my efficiency report. And,
nice.
Yeah.
And after your platoon time, you were assigned Assistant S3, 759th MP Battalion.
That was a very short segue into my next job, which was the Headquarters Detachment Commander. The gentleman before me didn't do that well, and he got relieved of duty. And I thought that was going to be a terrible thing, but I didn't realize he actually did me the best favor he could have done, because in commanding a detachment is very, very hard. But all we could do is get better. So it was a very good experience.
I'm sorry, what was the name of the job again?
I was the commanding officer for the 759th MP Battalion, headquarters, and headquarters detachment.
Oh, that's right.
It's kind of two things. An HHD
Right.
is about 100 soldiers. They're mainly the staff. I'm actually the commander for the commander, for administration, if you will. All the majors, the captains, all the personnel section, the intel section, the supply section, the S1, 2, 3, 4, commo, that was the soldiers I commanded. Now, it's not always fun, Carol, because I'm commanding a bunch of soldiers that all work for someone else. That outrank me in most instances. So you got to kind of work with the other staff officers, develop a rapport. I was lucky because my time as a platoon leader, I kind of had a decent reputation, so I already knew a lot of them. So when I did become the HHD commander, it was a easy transition.
Okay. You did that for a year and a half.
Year and a half. While I was the HHD commander, that's when I was sent to, deployed to Honduras in the, I want to say the springtime frame of 1986. My major, the same gentleman, called me in and said, remember when we cheated you out of taking your platoon to Grenada? He said, well, we're going to make up for that now. We're going to send you to Honduras. At that time, Carol, I never even heard of Honduras. I've heard of Central America. I didn't know what was going on there. And I wasn't really happy again. The mission was, I was supposed to be an evaluator for a National Guard MP company for their 2-week training, and I was supposed to be the liaison to my counterpart in the FUSEP. The FUSEP are the Honduran police. I won't say it right, so I won't try to, but it's their national police, and the platoon leader of the MP unit that was in the local area.
Wouldn't you have to know how to speak the language?
Well, luckily, I didn't, but they did. There was a lot of the people that we worked with on the Honduran Army, they spoke pretty decent English, not great. I don't remember if we had a formal interpreter, but the mission down there was not supposed to be a mission where we engaged the enemy. We were down there, we were told the engineers were building roads, medical people were providing treatment, MPs were providing security. But I wasn't told until I was sent to Texas prior to going for a 26-hour orientation and threat briefing as to what was going on in Central America. And we were told point blank, we're not there to engage the enemy, but we are there to defend ourselves. So we went through the use of force.
Sounds familiar.
Incredibly familiar. So we were all a little hesitant. We weren't going down there, we realized we weren't downrange Fort Dix. You know, we're not going just with blanks. This is all locked and loaded. But we weren't there on missions to engage the enemy. We weren't going out to seek nor to destroy. Just to defend, make sure that our troops were safe, and anything that was needed, if we needed to support anything. And there were a few real world instances while I was down there. One evening, I was called out of my cot by in the officer tent, if you will. I was in one of the officer tents, and it was me, a warrant officer, and then everyone else outranked us. A couple captains, major, lieutenant colonel. Many of them were Vietnam vets. So I had just a great time talking to them and gaining experience. We enjoyed the back and forth. Well, MPs came and got me one evening, probably about 11 o'clock at night. So I had to throw my gear on. Now all the other guys know something's going on. Go to the MP tent, they go, we got a real world incident. And even though you're not their company commander, you're the senior guy security-wise here on this mission. So what do? Funny story. After I dressed, put my boots on, I told the MP, go ahead, I'll meet him there. And I remember walking outside my tent, and you know, Honduras is one of those places very hot during the day, it gets cool at night, very cool, sometimes almost cold. So I remember looking up at the sky and saying, Lord, please just help me not to spaz out. And that made me laugh. You know, help me not to freak out in front of the troops. And I made myself laugh. I remember just looking down at the ground, and I relaxed myself. I said, okay, put the map up on this big table. They had the sergeants around it, and the company commander and the lieutenant, and we went through what we were supposed to do. Everybody got up. It was a stand to. We alerted, you know, be alert. We had patrols going out in different sectors looking for something, looking for anything that, you know, what was seen by 2 helicopter guys was a squad, they believed the squad's, at least the squad size element, moving in our direction in the general vicinity. That's not good. Again, we were there for training. So we believe that the actions we took thwarted this. Whatever recon they were doing forced them to go to another area. And because we were on a higher level of alert and in a tactical mode, we were never hit. The information was then sent up through battalion, up through brigade, and from there as a first lieutenant, I don't know whatever else happened. But
what were your actions?
well, the first thing I told them was I wanted all the soldiers up, because at that point, we were on like 30%. About 1/3 of the guards were up every other guard post, making sure they could have interlocking fire. So I made sure everybody got up, back to 2-man in every position, and then we overloaded our patrols, and I sent them out in a circular motion, like the old Budweiser circles, around our camp, in the general vicinity of where they're coming from, in the specific direction, but also in the general area on both left and right sides, so that we had full coverage. And by doing that, it took these guys off their course, because what I believed, they weren't looking to engage an enemy. They were just they were trying to find some.
Recon.
I'm sure that's what it was. I'm sure it was a 10, 12 person recon. The pilots said they had the ammunition across like this. And that's a sign of Cuban backing. And the Sandinistas, we were supporting the Contras in Honduras. Nicaragua was supporting the Sandinistas. And the Sandinistas were also backed by Cuba. And if my history is good, I think also, in some degree, by Russia. So we came out of that pretty well. There was no firefight, no enemy exchange. But a few weeks later, I was involved in a firefight. And we were at a Puerto Cortez, which was port operations. We were in a fixed structure near the naval base there. And it must have, Carol, I want to say 5 o'clock in the morning. I was in a room with our captain, 2 NCOs, and myself. And we were woken up by a couple pop, 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 and then it went to a full-blown attack, if you will. And none of us, the first thing we did was get to the ground, low crawled, got the weapons, and by the time we could engage, we were, and find out what direction it was coming from, it stopped. We all just waited, and it dissipated. People then came out, troops came out of the woodwork, and so we were fortunate that we 4 were in on the defensive, didn't get hit, but it seemed to me to last about 3 to 5 minutes.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. You understand that. That's an incredibly long time when you're getting shot at. By the time we got out and into position, it maybe lasted another minute or so. And again, it's hard to tell because the time, and again, I wasn't looking at my watch, but no one was really sure what was going on. The Honduran people really didn't tell us anything. We were figuring it was a terrorist type of hit, but no one knew for sure. We don't know if it was local fanatics. We don't know if it was Sandinistas. I don't think it was Sandinistas, only going by the location we were at. I don't think there's any way they would have been there. But there were fanatics. There were terrorists. I didn't realize how dangerous in general Honduras was and is. It's pretty dangerous now. Mm-hmm. And then I remember talking to other folks that said there's stuff going on at the border. There were SF guys I knew that said there was fighting at the border. And but Honduras then was not considered a combat tour. We went over not realizing it wasn't a combat tour. It was a deployment. But after talking to different folks, I was hearing different stories like mine. Now, not from all of them. Many folks went, it was a very peaceful 2 weeks training, back to the States, or, they did the roads, they did the medical. But more and more, one fellow I knew, I think either when I was there or after I left, an MP was shot and killed. And the guy told me he was down there when that happened to the MP. So I would just hear different stories. And then as I heard last year sometime, an organization, much like happened during El Salvador, was looking into this being recognized as an actual combat tour.
Hey, how you doing?
I don't know how that ever came out. I figured let them do their thing.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting because, as I said, the more people I talked to, people would say, oh, we had an incident. We were flown in by helicopter to the border. And a friend of mine, who was down there at the same time, First Lieutenant Tommy Jacobs, he was actually down there on a 6-month deployment with his platoon. And they were sent to an area that had a break in a defensive line. Well, they were sent to seal up the break. So there was, I will never over-glorify anything. This was not Vietnam. This wasn't what's going on now in Iraq or Fallujah or other places. But what this was a harm's way situation. We couched it as a low-intensity conflict. It was between the Contras and Sandinistas, and we just happened to have been there. Why or whatever, I don't know. But we were there doing our jobs. And that's what we did. We went down, we did our jobs, we came back. That was it.
Okay. John, you mentioned another job for you in Honduras was evaluator of National Guard MP Company. Was that New Jersey National Guard?
No, actually it was the Missouri National Guard. There were units from Alabama. I know the service and supply folks were from Alabama, and I had the MPs. I don't remember where the engineers were from. I don't know if there were any New Jersey units. At that time in my career, it was only about my maybe 5th year or so, I really had no experience with reserves or National Guard. But this is a good time for me to mention this. I've told people that I meet now, I was one of those that, active duty, I'm a hardcore MP, nothing, we can do anything. I don't want to be down there with National Guard. I don't want to be down there with reservists. I want to be down there with full-time, I want to be down with Vietnam vets, all this one. I got the most wonderful learning experience about our National Guard and our reserves. And it happened almost immediately. When I met them, they were so professional. Now, they also had a fun side to them, which I actually like. And they had a human side, which I actually like. And I'm no poster boy soldier. I'm a regular person. But they, to a person, they were so professional. They were so good. That night, when we had to get into high gear, there was no hesitancy. They were solid. And not just the real world, even the training part, all the missions they did, they took them all seriously. So so now, which is why I am a huge fan of our National Guard, not only because I know many of the New Jersey National Guard, personally, and reservists, but across the country. The respect I gained for them, realizing they had other jobs. And then they were still doing this. I almost couldn't get my arms around it. I met the chaplain, hung out with the chaplain. Come to find out, many of the MPs were Vietnam vets. Many of them were police in their hometown. So now the captain was explaining to me, this is I don't know if this is an above average, below average. All I know is it was so, what a great eye-opener for me. And me turning around and kicking myself in the backside saying, okay, welcome to reality now. They're not only as good, in instance, they're better. And it's all up to the individual person, the individual unit. And these folks, the folks that put the showers in, have showers out in the field, real showers, like you see on MASH. When I've ever gone to the field with my MPs, we never had showers. We washed out of our steel pots. We used the helmet liners. Not the helmet liner. We took the helmet liner out and used the steel pot. We don't use steel pots anymore, now they're Kevlars. But the cooks took pride in making sure we ate good. They had movies brought in. They had a specialist put in the movies like he'd done this his whole life. What a wonderful experience. And I felt just as safe with them as I did with my own troops. I always felt safe with my troops. They were good. The National Guard down there were solid. That's why it's coincidentally so cool that I'm in the National Guard Museum. It's,
True. Okay. You were asked to accompany the two armed MPs who were escorting our civil affairs officer on a mission to a local school.
I'll be very quick on that because that's more of a fun thing. Because there was activity in the area, our S5, she would go to the different things, she would do the fun things. She'd go to schools and meet with people. So she would always have to have two armed MPs escort wherever she went. And this one day where there was talk of intel of possible activity, either on the way there or in the general area, she asked me if I'd go. You know, and I talked to the captain who I was evaluating, and no problem. So I dragged my Vietnam warrant officer buddy with me. I don't remember John's last name, I see his face. So we became buddies, so I dragged him with me. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, I guess. We get out of the Jeep and we start walking in, one MP to the left, one MP to the right, looking up in the trees, looking, seeing everything's okay. And I told John, I said, hey, back away from Melanie. Melanie was the lieutenant, the S5. I said, back away from Melanie a little bit, just in case a sniper misses her, I don't want him to hit you. Kidding, Army humor, just kidding. And when I said that, both MPs said, Lieutenant, will you please stop kidding like that? I said, okay, it's just a little humor to make sure we're all relaxed.
Oh, okay, that's good.
But I didn't even think they heard me. And of course, the Vietnam vet he enjoyed it. Of course, Melanie actually enjoyed it too. But that was a very quick, we spent a great day with this really fine officer, just putting on a great impression of the United States Army for these kids and the teacher. One teacher, it's like one of those very small schools. They're so poor.
Right.
I don't even, everything was, it's what you see on TV from years ago. Very poor. We were outside of the town of Yarrow. That's where our camp was, Camp Big Bear. I was part of Joint Task Force Bravo, and my camp was Camp Big Bear. Part of General Terenzi. I don't even want to go there, I'll mess that up, but it was Camp Big Bear. And the town of Yarrow, the parts that we saw of it were very poor. We drove probably so much of Honduras when we were down there doing different things. And there's a few towns that were relatively built up, but it was a very poor country. A lot of trouble.
How long were you there?
A couple months. My wife and I were trying to remember.
Oh, okay.
I don't even remember because we were considered TDY. We weren't like on a deployment order. I was there on a TDY orders.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, and that was part of again, what we were told, that we're all down there for training exercises. We're not there, to engage the enemy. We're there just to do this. What I found out after years, and not even researching, just kind of being told, it was probably that the government was trying to not escalate it into a war, especially at our doorstep to our neighbors down south. But it was done because it seemed like communism was on the rise, and there was the Nicaragua, Honduras thing, the Sandinista Contra. So we were just kind of there as a professional show of force, as a secure show of force. And of course, the MPs were the ones at that where we were they were the protection. Now down at the border, there were combat troops. There was SF folks at the border of Honduras and Nicaragua.
Honduras, our involvement was 81 to 92.
Well, we're still there, I believe. But I believe the reason I used 81 to 92 is the organization that was recommending that Congress look at authorizing it as a combat tour. That's the time frames. When it was hot, at the hottest point, if you will, was 81 to 92. I know 93 and 94, I remember reading about things, 96 when I was there, 97. But that was this organization that's pushing, or maybe I should say pushed. They might be done. They might have said, well, that's, we gave it a try and that's okay. My thing was, I know what the troops did.
Right.
I know what they were under, and that was enough for me. There's nothing else that needs to happen from it.
Right.
Group went down, did their job, and came home.
And it's called the Central American War?
No, that's what they're calling it. That's not what I'm calling it.
Okay.
They're couching it as the war between the Contras and the Sandinistas, the fighting they were having. I'm not sure what, like El Salvador, they were actually lumping it in to the time frame that El Salvador, I guess El Salvador was recognized as a war from 81 to 92, and that might have been couched as a Central American War. And this group, the Honduras bunch, is kind of streamlining with them. And I think theirs was 81 to 92.
Okay. See, this is a area of history that we don't get too many veterans to come and talk to us about.
I would say, too, there might not have been many from New Jersey.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think that could have been. I was like an anomaly because I was sent as an active duty guy to evaluate and to liaison. So I didn't go down with my soldiers. I was an individual kind of filler.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying all of that for me. You graduated MP Officers Advanced Course, Fort McClellan, March of '87, and you were selected to be MP Officers Basic Course Small Group Leader.
It was a wonderful job. I was so lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I put through 5 classes, a total of 65 lieutenants. A small group there were 4 captains that had anywhere between 10 to 15 lieutenants, and that made up 1 class. So I had my own piece of that pie. And we personally taught probably 75% of their instruction, and then the other 25% came from, like, the lawyers would come in to do law, the infantry guys would come in to do basic tactics, the field artillery guys would come in. But we personally, us 4 captains, taught them, the majority, we gave them all their field training, all their weapons, all their PT, and it was a great experience. Also caveated by another fun time was my daughter was born in December of '87, and that was smack dab, like my son was smack dab in the middle of my platoon time, my daughter was smack dab in the middle of my small group leader instructor time. And it was a very inspiring time, kind of like what I learned I did with them. I was very, very hard initially. Not humiliating, just as hard as I could be on them without ever crossing the line. I did it by design. I saw my sergeants doing that. That's how we have to do it in this business. And in the beginning, you could see every one of them, there was a level of fear. And then you could see Carol after probably a week or 2, the fear went and became anger. Because now they're saying, why has it got to be so hard on us? Then probably halfway through the course, it became kind of like, I get it. Now I see why.
Oh.
I see why he's doing it. And then by about 3 weeks out to probably the end, it became a love affair. And I always had to keep my stoic, position. But they knew I really cared for them, and they would show their love, because every class, they would give wonderful gifts from the heart. They would come and want to just talk and thank, and they got it. And every one of them went on to be outstanding. I don't recall ever hearing any of the ones that me or the other guys trained that ever kind of didn't just become very good officers. Very high-performing, good people. So it was such an amazing tour. Both my wife and I, son and daughter, Lily was very little, Eddie was now a little person. And it was a wonderful tour, a wonderful time, and just a great experience. I will also tell you that some of them have kept in touch with me. And that's ultra special. And I told them when I was the instructor, I said, many of you will pass me up. And that's right. And I will call you sir and ma'am. And I'll salute you, and that's right. That's what our job is. And one of them, well, a few of them have. And I've seen them recently. One was at Fort Dix, Kurt O'Rourke. And Jesse Galvin became a full colonel, and he became the Military Police Corps Regiment Assistant Commandant. And he invited me to his change of command. And even recently, he's invited me to his retirement ceremony. And those type of things are very, very, they're very, very rewarding. And the funny thing, the ones that have passed me will not call me John. They continue to call me sir. And I tell them, that's not the right way. Mm-hmm. They said, no, you're always our senior. Oh. Standing on his airborne wings.
Kurt O'Rourke.
Yeah. He invited me to his airborne graduation. I was an instructor at Fort McClellan, and before I moved, he graduated airborne school. And he invited me to come down, and I pinned his wings on him.
I think I have to move over here for a second.
That's when I used to be in good shape. And the person I'm pinning the airborne wings on was Lieutenant Kurt O'Rourke, now full Colonel Kurt O'Rourke. He was in my last class of second lieutenants. This was the guidon I was presented when I was a company commander in Korea. I was there 89 to 91, and my soldiers presented this to me when I changed command to come back to the States. This, when I retired from Fort Monmouth, the public affairs officer asked me to bring in a couple pictures. Actually, she asked me to bring a bunch of pictures. And she wanted to do an article on me for the Fort Monmouth newspaper. This is the actual article she did, and these are two pictures she used. But unbeknownst to me, she took the rest of the pictures and made this collage for me.
Oh.
And this was presented to me. This is one of my treasured, my very prized possessions. And as I said, this was the actual article that Fort Monmouth did. This and this are from the same newspaper, the Fort Dix newspaper. This was when we were out in the field. I was a second lieutenant, I was a platoon leader, but we went to the field one weekend with just the officers and senior NCOs. So the public affairs came out and did an article. And that's me and Captain Sotomayor. This was when I was fortunate to be selected as the Fort Dix Company Great Officer of the Year. This was the article from that time. Then as we go down here, this is a snapshot of my wife and I. As a first lieutenant, this picture was from the event when I was awarded the Company Great Officer of the Year. This shot is from OCS time. We ran a half marathon as 30 of us as a group, and the local local TV station down in Fort Benning, Georgia, thought that was so cool. They wanted to come and interview us. And because I was unfortunately the class company physical training officer, the captain said, "We want you to interview the student, not me." So I was on TV for our class running event. And many of these other pictures, these are from Korea. This is the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders that came to Korea. My my troops had the very unfortunate and difficult task of meeting them and being their security, which I had no problem getting volunteers for. This was when I was a small group leader. My first class presented me with a Harper's Ferris pistol, and this is the pistol. In fact, this is also the pistol that they presented me. There's a picture of it here.
Where do you keep that pistol when you're home?
Oh, there's an actual piece that it falls on, but the piece wasn't in working order, so I couldn't bring it.
Oh.
But we have it mounted.
Right.
This is when we were in Korea. I was a company commander. My company was fortunate enough to win the Department of the Army Maintenance Excellence Award. And this is us being presented that. This is a special shot, which I just can take a very brief moment. This NCO, I'm doing his very last re-enlistment in the Army. When I first came in the Army, in advanced individual training, we would have other soldiers from other MOSs joining us, and some of them were senior to us. I was a PFC because of the college. He was a sergeant coming from another branch, which I don't remember what it was, switching to MP. And I had a very deep respect for him. He was so sharp. And he had a respect for me. So a couple of times through our career, our paths would cross, and we stayed in touch. And he asked me if I would re-enlist him for his final re-enlistment. So I have kept that because that's a bright spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is when I was with West Point's prep school. This is a snapshot when I was an enlisted guy playing softball. This is another one when I was a small group leader down at Fort McClellan, Alabama. This one, if you can see it, is when I was an enlisted guy with a couple friends up in Seneca Army Depot. This is my wife, myself, and my platoon leader from when I was an enlisted guy. This one here is my father and my wife pinning on my OCS bars. This is a great shot of us in Korea with my now 34-year-old son and 30-year-old daughter, and we won't tell Fran's age, but we were all much younger because this was 1989. So this shot is 29 years ago, maybe 28 years ago, if my math is right. This was my amazing first sergeant from when I was in Korea, where I was the commander and he was the first sergeant. This is my wife and I with a gentleman named Walter Kay. Walter used to be the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. Each state has one or two CASAs, civilian aide to Sec Army. And that's Walter Kay's. I was responsible for his commissioning service when he became a CASA. And so he wanted to have a picture with me. So appreciative for what they did for him up at West Point. And unfortunately, the best shot here is my wife, son, daughter, and I. It's behind my head here. Mm-hmm. This is us when we went to my last formal at the prep school. And this is when I was a company commander in Korea. One of the folks took a picture of it, and somehow the audiovisual folks at Fort Dix cut around it.
Three-dimensional.
Made it three-dimensional.
Could you grab your nameplate, your desk?
Same one, you noticed that.
Yes.
Isn't that great?
So that's from Korea.
This was actually presented to me prior to that, but I had it with me when we were in Korea. Yep. Possession. I got this for being the Fort Dix Company Grade Officer of the Year. And again, this is only because of all these men and women that I served with. Mm-hmm. And also because of the energy I got from my family, things I learned from mom and dad, stepmom, stepdad, mm-hmm. a lot of good people. But this is why. It's all that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you know what this is called? This is where, when you get the saber, the saber goes this way, the carrying piece goes this way, inside it. That's what, yeah, they're like two, this is also an award, but it's like all combined.
Very nice.
Listen, the people out there at Fort Dix did such a great job.
Seal it up.
This I was presented at prep school when I retired in 2003.
John, now we're up to Daegu, Korea. 89 to 91, and your family's there with you.
Yes, I was fortunate that I was offered, again, a gentleman from the past, Major John Bilbo, now Lieutenant Colonel Bilbo. He just finished 2 years as the Provost Marshal for 2nd Infantry Division. And he was taking over as the battalion commander for the MP Battalion. You gotta help me out there.
Oh, the 728th.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, my fault. You want to redo that? All right. Well, the 728th MP Battalion and one of the companies, the flagpole company, was the 188th MP Company. And he offered me that. The only stipulation is you got to do 2 years if you bring your family. So I said, yeah, I was offered the year before the 2nd MP Company and 2nd Infantry Division, but that would have been 1 year, but without the family. So the colonel knew how I was, so we took the 2-year option, and it was a great 2-year tour. Ed and Lil now were becoming, young people. Eddie was starting school. Lily was moving her out and about and having fun. My company, I took a company, this was rare. Usually I took units that weren't too good. This company was very good. I took it from a friend of mine, Captain Debbie Geiger. My first sergeant, Ron Brown, was stereotypical, outstanding first sergeant. The sergeants we had were great. The platoon leaders were, for young platoon leaders, did an exceptional job. The troops were great. Korea, this was a time of real world tension, because it was the build-up for Desert Storm. In fact, during our time in Korea, we were put on alert. The 188th MP Company was alerted to go to Desert Storm. Now, we didn't go to Desert Shield. We didn't have to be part of the build-up. But while we were policing the bases there, and we keeping things safe, we were also getting ourselves combat ready, plussing up to C1, and just ready to go.
Plussing up to C1?
Yeah, combat, C1 is the combat rating you have to be at to deploy. Sometimes you could be at a C2 rating if, say, you're missing a few vehicles or if you're missing some people. But when you're deploying, you got to be at C1, combat ready 1. So we were at C1, and we were ready to go. But we were supposed to go in the 2nd week. Being a person of history, you know it ended in 4 days. So we were stood down. And this, as you know, this happened to me during Grenada. But this time I was prepared. I was stood down once, and I was sent to Honduras. So I was prepared to look at my troops this time and say, look, we got the word, we were prepared, ready to go. And if we're stood down, you stand down. You did your job. Did it the right way. We had a couple incidents, though, during this. There was a bomb scare in the school that my son attended, which was on Camp Henry. And we got a lot of bomb threats during the build-up. We were in Korea. But this time, and I, as the Provost Marshal, let me just backtrack. I was the company commander. But I was dual-hatted as the Provost Marshal, which means I had the company detective side, and I had the police side. I had 162 GIs, 60 Katyusha, which were Korean augmentees to the United States Army, and I had 130 civilian Koreans working for me, which included guards, people in the police station, interpreters. So I had about 350 people total responsibility, and it was awesome. I had a senior sergeant running the company and a senior sergeant running the police station, the provost marshal office. First sergeant with the company, master sergeant running the PMO. And we had a bomb threat at my son's school. I always went to make sure that I was there when the dogs got there, when the school, if it had to be evacuated, I was the one that made the call. Well, one day, we found an actual device, and it was in my son's school. And I had to tell the principal to evacuate the school, called the dogs in, the EOD there, and to the side of us was the quarters, my quarters. My quarters were on Camp Henry, which were very close to the school. And my daughter was in the house, my son was in the school, so needless to say, my adrenaline factor was at peak level, but I had to remain calm. I couldn't panic the kids and the teachers. And I knew the EOD guys would do the right thing. So they took it apart, got it as far as they could, said they couldn't take it any further, they would have to blow it in place. Because if they didn't, it was going to blow on its own. So they did a controlled detonation. And again, I've just been blessed to work with these, the two gentlemen were spectacular. Cool. I don't know what was going on inside of them, but outside they were cool. They just did a great job. But we had a couple terrorists that my soldiers, we called it an arrest at first because we just thought they were regular old bad guys, but it came back down through channels that they were actually terrorists looking to do some bad. So they officially, you could change it from an arrest to a capture. Oh yeah, and this was going on all day. Oh. Now my guys did that one, I wasn't with them. I was only the one, as the commander. If they do something good, you get credit. If they do something bad, you get credit. So I just got the credit from what those spectacular soldiers did. Oh yeah. But we had a few incidents. We had fire bombings, and I was there with the group on some of them. Fire bombings were like, in Korea, were like a Coke bottle, where they had things inside the Coke bottle that could explode, and they would put like a washcloth or a towel inside and coming out, and then they lit the towel and they threw it, and it would cause it wouldn't cause a level of explosion that would, say, explode a building this size, but it could hurt. It will mess up.
Start a fire.
Start a fire. Oh, it would mess up your day.
Like a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah, exactly like that. Different sizes, different devices, and my guys and gals stood strong against that. Now in Korea, it was a little easier because the Korean camps were closed forts, like all the bases are now since 9/11. We were that way in Korea from when I got there, since before the build-up for Desert Storm. So we were hardened. It was a little better, but still, when you're dealing with this, we had things called wildfire missions. Wildfire missions were when there was a possible riot or uprising or some kind of problem. And I had to always have a platoon that was on call for wildfire mission. I also was fortunate to command this company during 2 Team Spirits. If you don't know that term, Team Spirit, Carol, is the huge multi-agency training event in Korea. And it's meant to, you'll hear periodically that the North Korean leaders say, stop those training events. I'm looking at that as a provocation of war. It was Team Spirit. I don't know what it's called now. It might not be called Team Spirit. When I was there, it was called Team Spirit. It was everybody, Marines, Navy, everybody was involved. And I had to send one of my platoons up to the maneuver element up in by the 2nd Infantry Division. Because that's where the training, that's where the majority of it. There was some other training in the other parts of the peninsula, but the hardcore training, and it was all to prepare for a possible invasion from the North. And that would anger the North when we did it. But when you think about it, we had to. We have to train like we're going to fight. It's just that unfortunately we were right on the border. And that's the thing.
The 38th parallel?
38th parallel. And when I was there, I mean even up until now, since the war, we've had troops looking at them every day. And my company was in the top part of the lower third of the peninsula. So if you can imagine, put it into three quadrants. Go to the second quadrant and the third quadrant. We were right on that border. So we were Tegu was like at the top of the lower part. But my company had missions throughout the peninsula. We had convoy missions left and right, all the way up to the bottom part of the Z, not the top, not up to where we're looking across at North Korea, but the bottom part. Got a lot of great cooperation from the Korean government. They loved us while we were there. I got to meet many of the chiefs of police, and some of them are on the board in some of the pictures. So it was a good tour. My family got to do a lot of things. We had to pretty much stay near camp, but it wasn't, I mean, you could go wherever you wanted, you just had to be careful. You had to know where you were going. I always felt safe because they were my MPs. I knew what they could do. So, it's a good tour.
That's good. Okay. Let's move on to, you were selected as 728th MP Battalion and the 8th MP Brigade Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award recipient and a runner-up for the Korea-wide competition.
Again, I was fortunate, and that only happens when you got good people. And that's what happened. The Army still does it. It's called the General Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award. There's one, I guess, for every major command. And then some major commands will have one within the command, battalion level, brigade level. I was lucky, I was the battalion and the brigade level winner, and I was the Taegu area winner. And then I also competed against, I think, 3 or 4 other folks for the Korea-wide, for the 8th Army. And I was one of the runner-ups, and I was just so proud to have been. But again, it's true. I could not and would not have been if I didn't have great troops. It's the truth. The things I got, truth be told,
You share it with them.
It is them. It's them. I was lucky enough to be the commander.
Who gets the credit?
Leader. Yeah.
Like you said earlier.
Yeah, it's them. That's why I would always tell them, this is not just me making you feel good. This is real. If I could chop it up in pieces, I'd give us all one. Because it's all of us.
You took second place in a Korea-wide Air Force pistol competition.
Yeah, I was proud of that. Because it was, in the Peacekeeper Challenge, I'll go back a little bit. The Peacekeeper Challenge I mentioned earlier, that competition was everything as an MP. Handgun, rifle competition, 60 machine gun competition, running, climbing, confidence course run, obstacle course, tactical, everything. And I wouldn't be in like every event. Like if it was a 4-person event, the best 4. If it was a 2, the best 2. So I was in a few and I wasn't in a few. But I could shoot pretty well. I was pretty good. I could shoot well. And I was proud of that in Korea. I was told at the last minute, our battalion was entering the competition. And one of the people had to back out, I don't remember why, at the last minute. So without any practice, without putting any lead down range to get the eye back, I was told like 2 days in advance. And I was lucky. I took second place individually. And what's cool is all my Air Force buddies, we used to say as a joke that the 7th Army, their command would invite the Army just so we could clap while they go up and take all the trophies. Someone could be in the audience. So I was happy that, I grabbed one of them myself. And some of the guys and gals who I became buddies with in the Air Force, we kidded a little bit about that. You're supposed to make sure we get them. You're not supposed to come up and take one yourself.
Okay. Your company won the best MP company in Korea in 1990.
I don't know if the Army still does it, Carol. There used to be a thing called the Jeremiah P. Holland Award. It's an Army-wide award for the best military police company in the Army. And then, much like the Douglas MacArthur Award, each major command would have one. So we had one in Korea, and my company did win it. And then the cool thing is, when I left, which was June of '91, they won it for the Army for FY '92, which meant it encompassed 6 months of my time and 6 months of the new fella's time. So we were all proud of that. But yeah, I was the commander when we won the Korea one.
And the DA Maintenance Excellence Award for '91?
Yes, that's one of the pictures on the picture board.
I knew that sounded familiar.
Yeah, that's, my sergeant who's in the picture, he's one of those people that if you could meet him in the States, he'd probably be running a garage somewhere. And he's the guy that everyone for miles would bring their car to. Because Sergeant Wood was like a MacGyver. He was like a genius. It was amazing how he could make any vehicle. He just had a knack, and he trained his guys well. He had I think 3 or 4 guys and 2 gals, and they were a great machine. Our maintenance was really that good, and maintenance is mainly your motor pool. Now it also encompasses the weapons, anything you do maintenance on, but vehicles is the big thing. So I was lucky. It's almost like I had a ringer. Having Sergeant Wood, I didn't win that. Now that's no kidding. I did not win that award. I'm the commander. I got to be there holding the trophy. It was my sergeant, my Lieutenant Gosselin, my motor officer, the troops. They were the ones that really did it. All I did was I published the training schedule. I made sure they were down to do the cleaning. I encouraged it. Gave the command emphasis. The credit I get was Sergeant Woods was one of my troops. That's it. He did it.
Your MP company took 2nd place and you took 3rd place in your weight class in the battalion weightlifting competition.
Yeah, and I'm proud of that because in 1989, we found that I had cancer. Luckily, it was a seminoma, and it was treated with just some couple weeks, about a month of radiation, and I was okay. But the reason that ties into the weightlifting story is my operation was in August of '89. The weightlifting competition was in June of '90. When I got back, I had to go to Tripler Army Hospital in Hawaii for the operation and for the treatments.
What town is that?
It was Honolulu. Tripler's in Honolulu. Yeah. And so after the operation, and I made sure everything was okay, my wife, God bless her, she gets our small son and smaller daughter. She puts them on a plane by herself, and they fly across from Korea to Hawaii to be with me. And they were with me for the next couple months. And I was there until October. When I got back to Korea, though, the 4 of us got back to Korea, now I had to be watched by the Korean doctors. The Army doctors in Korea.
Right.
And one of the doctors was my buddy Steve. And we would, do things together with other families. But Doc Steve said, "John, I know you like to work out. And I heard there's a competition." He said, "Please, don't let me have to tell your colonel. Don't enter it. You can't do that." I said, okay. So I not only entered it, but I took 3rd place. And I took 2nd place, the company took 2nd place. I was very proud of that. But I'm proud of it because it kind of like gave me some motivation after the operation to get back into shape. Rather than kind of, woe is me, which is kind of easy to do. It's easy to do. But, so that was like my goal. The goal was to be with the troops when we entered the competition. And it was, surprisingly to me, we did okay.
It's almost like mind over matter. Your mind can tell your body what to do.
Yes. I'm also religious, and I believe, the Lord had two guardian angels helping me. But I'm with you. I'm a firm believer of mind over matter. Many things, yeah.
That's good. And that brings us to, you became religious ed coordinator. And you and your wife were Eucharistic ministers.
Yes, Korea needed one priest, so they needed some help with some of the masses. So both Fran and I became Eucharistic ministers. If I recall, well, I just know one of the people that was there before me left. So I said to Father, I said, Father, please don't. I don't know if I should be doing this. Look, I'm a good guy, and I try hard, but I'm about the furthest thing from sainthood. I made my mistake. He said, no. I said, you're the right guy. We need the help. So both my wife and I did it. And we both also taught the religious education, and I think I was a principal there or something. I remember because they said, I asked, what's my job as principal? They said, well, you got to ring the bell, that starts class. I said, yeah, I can do that.
Okay. And now we are up to Fort Meade, Maryland, from 91 to 95.
I was in the
You
519th.
had 3 jobs, and you were in 2 units.
Right. The 519th?
Yes,
I get
Assistant
my-
Battalion S3 for the 519th.
Right. Yeah, I sometimes don't remember the names of the units, but that was a fun job. I did that for 1 year. And the unit then, the 519th, then relocated to Fort Leonard Wood. I think it relocated to Fort Leonard Wood.
But you didn't?
But I didn't, and I was offered to go. And that was really nice. I liked the commander a lot. And he wanted me, he was going to give me a job that was 1 rank higher than my current rank. He was going to make me the S3, which is normally a major. But I told him I didn't want to because I'd been in Korea 2 years and Alabama 3 years before that. And I really wanted my son and daughter. See, Maryland was perfect. It was right between Mom, who was up in Jersey, and Dad and Stepmom, who were in Florida. Mom and Stepdad were up there. So it was nice for us to have that. Fran's father was up in Jersey. So we had great family time. And I didn't want to, not after 1 year. So he politely told me I was making the mistake of a lifetime by not taking that job. And I politely told him, thanks, but we'll be okay. Mm-hmm. And luckily it worked out for everybody. Worked out for them. Worked out for me and my family. I ended up after 1 year with them moving to the headquarters command battalion, where I was the S3. And again, that was a major position, but they allowed me to do it as a captain. And then I did get promoted to major, and I became the battalion executive officer for the headquarters command battalion. And it was a really good tour, a lot of great experience. Carol, again, I sound like a broken record, but so many wonderful people. Great soldiers, great civilians that worked with us, great retirees, great families. It was just really amazing.
I'm sure they feel the same way about you.
I appreciate you saying that. I do hope that because I know a lot of them had an impact. And sometimes, we don't even know the impact we have. But so many of the people I worked with had an impact. Some instances, I wish someday I could go back and find them. And if I ever did tell them, you had an impact.
Mm-hmm. What town is Fort Meade?
Fort Meade, Maryland, was outside of a town called Severn, Maryland. Probably, I know it took us 18 minutes to get to Camden Yard, because we went a couple times, my son and I, and then my daughter and wife went to look at the end. But we were about 20 minutes from Baltimore. 20 minutes from Annapolis.
Oh, okay.
Nice, very nice side of town. The 519th was a great battalion to be in. They did actually deploy to Desert Storm. I kind of wish in some instances that I'd have been there with them that year before, but of course, you know, I never would have wanted to change anything, because then that would have meant I wasn't with the great troops I was with in Korea.
Right.
But it was a good battalion I was with, in the headquarters battalion. My boss that I worked for was Colonel Bob Wegman, and he's not with us anymore, but he was a very good boss.
You were promoted to major in 94.
Yeah, and that became his executive officer, which is a great job, especially for an MP, because for us MPs, you don't have as many commands and executive officer type positions, S3 type positions. So we're lucky enough to get them, but we really appreciate them.
And then the 4 years after that, 95 to 99, you were at West Point.
Yes, that's kind of from there, except really for one incident in West Point. Really, it was a lot of administration. West Point was a great job. My family absolutely loved it. My children just did so great up there in their sports and their school, their friends. My wife did great things. She was a tour guide, a West Point tour guide. She was a substitute teacher. She also did substitute in Korea and in Maryland. But West Point was just a great tour for everybody, Carol, and it was like, it really wasn't, and I'll be honest, it really wasn't like an Army type of tour that I'm used to. It was a very enjoyable, just a very, very good time. So we're at West Point now?
Yes.
Yes. Being the deputy operations officer at West Point was a thrill for me, because I'm not a West Point graduate. I'm an old OCS guy. So, you know, we were really welcomed with open arms by the entire West Point community. The general, my boss was a full colonel, my peers. I taught, part-time, I taught a thing called CHET, Cadet Honor Education Training. And you're on with, I'm a major, I had a lieutenant colonel who's the boss, another major and a sergeant, the four of us, that's a CHET team. And we taught honor education, and I also taught military training to seniors during their intersession, the time between the Christmas, I guess in the spring, there's like a spring break. So I just had a chance to do so much up there, but not really, I smile because it wasn't really Army. It was the fringe side of the Army. It was teaching new officers, being with them. It was teaching them about the Army. Now, I did that for a couple years in Alabama, but I always knew I was going back to the Army. You know, that would be like a stop-off. But I knew as a major, this could be, you know, getting near 20, because I'm a prior enlisted guy. But I did, after 2 years as the deputy operations, I was switched to be the deputy provost marshal. It's the assistant chief of police for West Point. And lo and behold, you know, I think, again, my career, I sum it up to as a wonderful balance, where I was in harm's way at some times, but I think the Lord said, I'm going to watch you, and I'm not sending you like to a Vietnam, like some of your friends, for a year. I'm going to kind of give you a piece of harm's way that you can handle. And it might have been my second week as the deputy provost marshal. My boss goes on vacation. So now I'm in charge. My daughter wanted to visit, and I don't know if Lily thinks it might have been bring your daughter to work. I don't know if it was. But the issue was she was with me in the morning, and I drove her around. I made her listen to the radio, took her into the police station. Then I just said, Lily, you got to go now. It's time to go. And I dropped her off, and on my way back, I hear on the radio, we need weapons out at Washington Gate. Because I didn't carry a weapon, Provost Marshal didn't, and our operations officer didn't. We didn't carry. We had weapons, they were kept in the station. We were kind of like Andy Griffith. We wanted our troops to carry the weapons and the patrols, but we didn't carry a weapon. We policed without a weapon, unless we needed it. Called up and found out that there was an escaped convict was being transported across by state troopers, and there's a highway, if you've ever been to West Point, there's a highway up where the ranges. And the state trooper was cutting across, and this person, and I'll never take a cheap shot because they were an amazing, amazing bunch, but somehow something happened. So we all went running out by patrols shooting out there. The town of Highland Falls had their local police, and the state troopers looked like they were organizing for Iwo Jima. They were out in mass, and it's on West Point, so I'm in charge. And somebody probably made a boo-boo, and I know they fixed it. I can guarantee that. But the guy got away, and he took the trooper's Glock. Glock has 18 rounds. And as he ran into the wood line, turned around and shot at the trooper who was valiantly trying to fight this person off. The person was much, much bigger than the trooper. But now he's loose on West Point with a Glock and 17 rounds. So I get my driver, we go flying up there, we're running through the wood line, and the troopers, my guys are lined up, troopers are there. A miraculous thing happened. We were all able to converge on this person. State troopers were on one side, the local police from the side of Highland Falls, and my MPs coming up from where we were. And it just was amazing how it fell into place. And my guys were getting on a bullhorn. There was a bit of a firefight, not long. The guy saw he was surrounded. The MPs are saying, just drop your weapon, we're going to take you in. And he turned the weapon on himself. It's now they call it, they didn't call it that then, they call it now suicide by cop.
Right.
You've heard that. Well, that's what happened. And my guys, they pulled him out of the wood line. I just happened to be there with them, and they did it all. My guys took him to the hospital on West Point. He's pronounced dead. He did die. But he did live, and they tried to save him. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, the state trooper lieutenant came in and thanked me and the MPs. He said he couldn't have done it without the MPs. And I knew that. But he said to me, this is a tough thing for us, so you're in charge, but we'd like to take it. And of course I said, you do what you have to do. You do what you have to do. But there's just another instance where I saw my troops. It's not even that people were uncomfortable to go flying out there. I had people that wanted to leave their post to go out there to pitch in. But everybody did their job. I needed someone on the radio. I needed people at the gates. I needed patrols in other areas. So the people that went handled it, and just that's why I love the troops. Mm-hmm. I love mine anyway. I got to tell you, they were amazing, amazing.
And it's good there was no friendly fire that happened.
It's amazing you said that. The only thing I gave to this, besides that I just happened to be in charge, the only thing I gave, I got on the radio, and when I heard the sound of rounds, all I said was, everybody get down and take cover. Everybody take cover. Because what you said, I knew that, they might not have realized that. We had a bunch of people with weapons, all closing in on someone.
Right.
But they were all amazing. The weapon discipline that they showed was incredible. They all were disciplined not to just start firing off.
Right.
And like I said, I was in the back. Unlike Fort Dix, I was up front and center with the group. In Korea, a couple of times front and center. I was just coming up along just to be there with them, just to be there. That's all. They had it. They had the captain in charge, Captain Stillman, had it well under control. Didn't need me. The NCOs, the troops, they made a very scary situation that could have become a hostage. There's West Point lieutenants, my family. I actually called my wife when I was going out on the way. I said, don't ask questions. Just tell all the kids in the neighborhood to get inside and call as many people as you can. Just tell them, get all the kids in the house. Because we were on the other side of the mountain from where they were. They were on the side where there were weapons fire. So if this fella, who was very scared, by the way, if he got around this mountain, he would have been in a housing area. And that, I don't even want to think of
Right.
the potential that could have caused. So it had a sad ending, but it had a good ending.
Had the best ending possible.
It had the only possible ending.
Yes.
Oh, the only other thing, Carol, the only other thing was if he'd have just dropped the weapon. But I think his adrenaline was so high, he couldn't see that as an option, and it's a shame.
Right.
But yes, beyond that, it had the best, thank God, the best possible. And really, through the years, my MPs have been great at keeping the fort safe, doing the right thing, never overreacting. I always wanted my MPs to look at themselves as lady and gentleman warriors. But I say lady and gentleman because they had to be good people. Good guys and gals, but also that could fight. And I wanted us to be supporting the community. See, we didn't always do road duty. Usually we were doing field training. But when we got road duty time, I always pushed the policing part, or community-oriented policing. And, most of them bought in. Some didn't. Some want to be, arrested. But most bought in to say, if you could just pull somebody over, give them a warning, you've done your job. They won't now do something wrong, and you've made a friend.
Right.
Yeah. So.
You completed your master's in education counseling.
Yeah, LIU, Long Island University, had an
Before
external.
online school.
Before online school, yeah. And how about that? But before
commute.
that, they had their professors actually come to West Point.
Oh, I see. Okay.
How about that? See, Carol, the TAC officers, the captains at West Point and the majors that work with the students, they're called TAC officers. Before you became a TAC, you had to get this master's. So it's quite a thing. For 1 year, these kids, they got the full-fledged, overloaded courses for counseling. But then the LIU said, well, if you want some of your staff and faculty and family, we'll come up at nights and it'll be a 2-year program. So I did mine from 6 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock at night for 2 years, at 4 nights a week. And, it's a push, but very rewarding. And I'm glad I did, because let me just backtrack real brief. I told you that I was not a real good student in high school. I self-admit. And I was not a good student in college till I found out I couldn't play football, until I met Jim Fitzsimmons. He's not with us anymore. And Mr. Fitz was a geography teacher. It wasn't my major, but I took him 7 times because he inspired me. And he took care, he would give me credit for things, so he forced me to work harder. And I got great grades with him, and I ended up getting my degree while I was an enlisted soldier through the New York's Regents program. And that afforded me, Carol, the ability to go for a master's when I did, and actually graduated much higher, with a much higher grade point average than I would have if I went right after college days. I did well, and was fortunate.
Mm-hmm. It's very impressive.
Fortunate.
And then you came down to Fort Monmouth, 99 to 03, Deputy Commandant for the West Point Prep School.
Yes.
Let's talk about that job.
It was a great opportunity, especially for a non-West Pointer. As the Deputy Commandant, you wear 3 hats. You're the assistant to the Commandant. You're also the Chief of Staff for the prep school. Bless. And you're also the commanding officer for the prep school staff and faculty, of which I had about a staff and faculty of about 70 or so, 80 some people. So it was 3 good hats that I wore. The West Point Prep, Carol, our kids did almost got into West Point, but not quite. So they're close. West Point, I think you need like a 1,300 or so SAT. On the old SAT, I don't know if it's still. And these kids were maybe 1220, 1230, much higher than I had. I couldn't even get into prep school. But these kids were good kids. They all had high, good sportsmen, volunteer. They played instruments, Eagle Scouts, just all around good kids. So they would do 1 year in the Army or whatever. They would apply through the ranks, and they would get into West Point Prep School, and they would do 1 year at prep. And if they passed, they were automatically in the next West Point class. West Point has about 1,000 per class, we'll say, and about 1/6 of that is made up of prep school. Now, what the prep school used to have, about half of the class coming from the ranks, but the other half would come from kids that almost got into West Point, as I mentioned, or were superior athletes, and they could contribute in some way. So they had to go to prep school and get 1 good year of our math, English, and military training, and PT, and then they went up to West Point. It was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed the experience, but what it did, Carol, if nothing else, I could have continued on with my military career because I was loving it. But MP Branch already said, you're going back to Korea. And my son was in high school, my daughter was in junior high, middle.
The hardest age.
Yeah. So, and I was here at Fort Monmouth. So I told MP Branch, leave me here as long as you want, but when you go to move me, I'm going to get out. I'm going to retire because I don't want to leave here. So they were going to get rid of me in 2. They let me stay 4. And I got 4 years out of it, which was amazing. And then after that, got a job out Fort Monmouth as a government civilian, which again was just fortunate.
You became lieutenant colonel while you were deputy commandant?
Yeah, after my first year, at the end of my first year, I got promoted to lieutenant colonel.
I'm interested that you were an instructor in time management. What are some pointers?
It's a great course that they had at prep school. They have, I think at West Point, it's called Success Development. In Success Development, it's all these things that, like note-taking, goal setting, time management, all these visualization, all these things that we know are really good, but it's hard to make it a course. So West Point rolled it all up into Success Development, and each was a block of instruction. It's really great. I think probably, I'm pretty sure other colleges have it now. I'm pretty sure. But this was a really, really good thing. So the time management, which was mine, it was teaching them the backward planning process, which my son and daughter, if you ever meet them, and my wife will tell you, I use quite a bit. They hear it all the time. The backward planning process is, say, me and you need to be at the windmill in Long Branch. Say we need to be there at 6 o'clock. Well, we don't start with now planning. We start with that. So we go fast forward to 6 o'clock. Then we say, okay, how long is it going to take to get there? Because both Carol and I are here in Seeger. Well, it's going to take 40 minutes. Okay, with that 40 minutes, we got to figure in 20 minutes for traffic and maybe whatever. So now we know it's going to be at least 5 o'clock that we're shooting for. Well, how much more work do we have to do here? We've got about 2 hours worth of work. Okay, so that's 3 o'clock. Now we say, well, do we have to go get anything before we go? So now we figure from backward, all the things we have to do backward to here, we have to be ready to leave here 2:15. Because then we have to go there and it's to 2:30, there to 3 o'clock, there, And the real beauty when you see that in motion is when you long-range plan something for like a month out. And you go, okay, we got to do this in a month. So, start it backwards. Driving time, how many stops do we have to make? How many different things do we have to do? I would tell them to use a party. Pick your parents' birthday party. Pick a party of someone you know. Let's backward plan. When's the party? Okay, put the calendar out, mark it. What do they like? When are you going to get the present? How long will it take? You going to order the present, or do you just pick it up? You know, all those things. Does your car have to get serviced? Do you have to get airplane tickets? All those things. So it's all common sense. It's things we do every day. We just codified it. West Point Prep codified it into a course.
I like that.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about 9/11, 2001. You're still in the service. Take me back to that morning.
Like all of us remember where we were. So I was walking in the door, prep school. I go in the back door, and I saw Specialist Robin Brunicardi. As I'm walking in, she goes, "Hey, sir, some guy just flew his plane into World Trade Center." So we're both going, weekend, too much to drink, who knows? Being flippant, we don't know, we have no idea what's going on. It was happening as I was walking into work. So I walk in, I sit at my desk, and it was minutes later, the same specialist, Robert Brunicardi, came to my desk in tears. She said, "Sir, you got to come to the mess hall." We had a TV in the mess hall.
Oh.
She said, "Sir, you need to come to the mess hall now. We need you there." She's tears. And this young woman laughed at everything in life. She like nothing seemed to bother her. She's in tears. I'm like, "Oh." So I go in, all my NCOs, all the sergeants, all the staff and faculty, not the students. The students were with the teachers. With all the staff and faculty, the commandant, we're all huddled around this big TV in the mess hall. And we're trying to now, like one of the NCOs said, we can't as a country come running to New York because that could be a diversion. The real attack could come on the West Coast. I mean, all my guys and gals are starting to think of these things. We have to be prepared. What if it's infiltrating streets? New York's hit, so everyone's now trying to get our arms around this. And what we do now, we pull all the students back from the class, and they went to the attack officer area. Of course, we have to explain to them, we brought them all out on a thing called the Go Army Pad. The Go Army Pad, Carol, is where we have formation every day, where all the platoons lined up, and they took accountability. So we had them all out there. Me and the colonel spoke to them and told them what was going on, tried to just calm them down. Of course, remember, some of our troops had parents who were in the military or in New York. And lo and behold, one by one, we had to start unpeeling whose parents were in New York. Do you have contact with them? Who's in D.C.? Who's wherever? So we're going now into evening. And we pretty much thought we were done for the day, so we can take a deep breath, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I actually had to go to a meeting with, of all people, my friend, Colonel retired Mike Ruane, who was a civilian at the time, working in the section that I took a couple years later, where I became the director of that section. They asked Mike to run a meeting in Russell Hall, Fort Monmouth, where all the leadership from the garrison was there, and they were getting their arms around what's going on and what do we have to do. And they made the decision to close. Remember when Fort Monmouth was an open, you could drive through? Mm-hmm. That night, we said we have to close, not we, Mike to the colonel, we have to close the fort. Mike Ruane ran that. And Mike, down the road, when I worked with him as a civilian, I got, again, another good guy, I got credit for a lot of things that Mike did with me and for me. And so we became friends, but that's the first time we actually looked at each other. And so I had to go, I was the rep from prep school. And I took the information back to prep school. And we all had to start getting ready to pull guard duty because we had to close the fort immediately, and they didn't have people to do it. So we all had to pitch in and stand at the gate with an armed Department of Defense guard, not guard, patrol person. Oh yeah. So as the dark as the day came to an end, and I finally made contact with my family, and my son, who was a senior at Monmouth Regional, and my daughter, who was a freshman at Monmouth Regional. How they were okay. I found out that one of our students, we thought we had them all covered. When one student came in with the sergeant and the officer and said, "We have one more problem. Her sister is held captive by the Taliban." Her sister was a Red Cross worker who was preaching religion. Could she have been a Red Cross worker? I think she was. Or was she on the religious mission? Let's shelf that. All I know is she was down there preaching. She was across the waters preaching religion. And when this happened, she became a prisoner of war, in essence. And they captured her. And she was being held. And it was our prep school student's older sister. So we got her to make contact with the family. And they just said, okay, it's in God's hands. They were very religious. And she went to class, and took us a little while to unsort what's going on and get back to some kind of normalcy and to see what's going on. And it was some weeks later, and we would check with her every couple of days. You know, the sergeants were great; they were front and center with her. But me and my boss would just sit down with her. You know, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And you may have remembered this because it was, they appeared, her sister, she appeared on Good Morning America back at that time. Her sister was, it's an amazing story, I'm sure we can Google it. Her sister and the woman she was with found captors, one of the captors was kind of sympathetic to them and being nice to them. So what the captor did was gave them the burqas so they could cover themselves as if they were locals and release them. Now, it didn't help them, didn't do anything, just release. And these women, I think it was two of them, they took off on their own. And they heard a helicopter, so they burned their headgear that the captor gave them. And the helicopter saw it. The helicopter was Army Rangers. And they swooped down and rescued them. I know this is like movie kind of, you know why I love troops now. You know why I love our troops. And she said it was amazing. So the sister, we released the sister to go on Good Morning America with the parents. And they said, oh yeah, she's in West Point's prep school and all this. And it was pretty cool. So the sister came to graduation. I'm getting emotional. So the sister came to graduation, and the student, my student, brought her to me and introduced us and said, this is Carlo. I wanted you to meet him. He's, very supportive, and, he's all words to the effect. He's a good guy. So I said to the sister, I said, I got to tell you, it's really cool meeting you. And your story is amazing. And this young woman, she said, well, I got to tell you, it's amazing meeting you. I've heard about you from my sister. I said, well, I said, no. I said, what you did is miraculous. I said, were you afraid? And she looked at me and said, I wasn't. She said, I know you're going to think. She said, I wasn't afraid. She said, and I'll tell you the truth, I'm going to go back and continue to preach religion. I said, well, I'll tell you what, my friend, you are a very strong person, and I'm glad we had a chance to meet.
It's a beautiful story.
It was amazing story. So, the prep school, being that I was at prep school for 9/11, you're not in a tactical role. We're in a strictly school administrative role. And after a couple weeks, especially when I was now deep into my second year, whenever that I was there, It's pretty far in. I knew Army was going to start. If I stayed, they were going to PCS me. So I would call Branch. I said, listen, I got a deal for you, okay? Don't move my family. Leave me here and send me across the waters. Link me up, send me, whatever, because it was before we started getting the troops involved. I said, just send me to a unit to deploy and keep my family right here. They stay in quarters. They said, John, we want to work with you, but we've got to move you. We need you to be in Korea. We got to move you. I said, okay, then never mind. I said, I gave you an offer. It's an offer you can't refuse. I did try to go. And I'm a firm believer if you don't volunteer, you just always be ready. Do your job. Stay fit. Stay mentally and emotionally ready to go. But like the old NCOs used to say, you don't volunteer for anything. You just be ready to go and go. But I kind of went against that. I said, send me. I'm sure you can use an old lieutenant colonel somewhere. They said, we can use you right now, but you got to go. We got to PCS you. I said, no, never mind. So from Fort Monmouth, that's when I decided it was going to be enough. And I retired in 2003. Mm-hmm. And it was a great experience there. My boss, Colonel Mike Anderson, the Commandant, we did a lot of good work with West Point's future leaders. We put a lot of good kids through, and they all did great jobs up at West Point.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about the history of the end of Fort Monmouth a little bit. Donald Rumsfeld, the Brack Commission,
Yeah.
and picking apart pieces of Fort Monmouth at a time so that it wasn't that full organized base that it had been. And I remember distinctly that your prep school was one of those last bits of functioning parts of Fort Monmouth.
I'll pick it up from 2005, when the announcement came out. I was the director for Plans, Training, Mobilization, Security. I did that from when I retired from the Army till when the base closed in 2011. And as I mentioned, I became the DPTMS, Director of Plans, Training, Mobilization, Security. And I had an all-star team, Mike, Larry Noel, who's not with us anymore. I had a mixture of retirees, people that were serving currently in uniform, and I had some great civilians that never served, but they were proud Army civilians. I had a great section. And we had heard through the years, Fort Monmouth would be on the
Chopping block.
but never got chopped. It got chopped a piece, Evans, the Evans area. So everyone was pretty confident. In fact, my first job as a civilian, Carol, I was the garrison commander, had tasked me with putting together a briefing, the garrison's briefing, to be included with the Fort Monmouth briefing to why they shouldn't close us. This was in December 2003. That was my first Army civilian mission. So I put it together. Me and Louise Cooper, who was in the DPTM, which was my section. I was one of the group now, not the director. I was one of the gang. So they went down, they pitched it, and we all thought Fort Monmouth had a really good pitch. Our piece, small piece of the garrison with the Fort Monmouth, command pitch. So we all went into the room where the TV is, up on the third floor in Russell Hall. It's garrison headquarters. Third floor is where the DPTM was. So me, Mike, Walter Gordon, the group, we're all sitting around, and people from other sections came in because we had the TV. So we had a bunch of people sitting there waiting to hear Fort Monmouth will not be closed. And we heard it got closed. And the room got real quiet. And I'm with people now, like I said, the military guys, I don't think it would have affected as much because they're going to PCS anyway. They're going to move. But the civilians and the retirees, this is their home. They've been working there 20, 30, 40 years, 10 years. Their parents worked there. And I sat there and we shut the TV, we looked at each other. All right, let's see what happens now. We know Fort Monmouth's going to appeal it. they're gonna put back. Because I don't know if you recall, they did appeal, and they looked at Fort Monmouth's. They gave Fort Monmouth, the only one they said, well, we're gonna relook. In fact, let me say again, because you're saying, you know already, you probably remember more than me. I think when they said we were closed, they said, with the exception of Fort Monmouth, because we have to look at something. They had to like check
It's
something.
familiar, yeah.
So we were pretty sure, we had a really good case. But then they came back and said, nope, you're closed. And then that was the point when we had to start executing the BRAC base realignment and closure, the BRAC mission of closing Fort Monmouth. And at that point, I had nothing to do with the post-closure, just up until closure, because I was still the DPTMS. So we had to go through, all the agencies had to start streamlining their own individual agencies. They had to start moving property and equipment.
Aberdeen, Maryland.
Well, most of it. The prep school went up to West Point.
Before that also, what about the signal school?
Signal School, I think, was already closed when I got there.
Oh, okay.
My time, but I heard all about it. I know all about it. Chaplain School was there. But they had to close everything piece by piece. Some things simultaneous, some things individually. They moved the CERDEC, which is one of the research and development. The other major command was CERDEC. Of course, CECOM, Communications Electronic Command, they all went to Aberdeen. Some pieces went to Belvoir. As I said, prep school went up to West Point. The chapel, stuff from the chapel went to Chaplain School, I think. Our museum, I think initially went to Belvoir, well, no, went to Aberdeen, I think. And then from Aberdeen, I think it moved somewhere else, but it was such a sad time and a sad thing to live through. People started trying to find jobs, seeing if they could retire. It's really not something anyone should have to live through. People on Fort Monmouth did pretty well. The garrison started bringing on guest speakers, monthly speakers, motivational speakers to come help you, through something like this, or to find a new job, or excuse me. A guy named Larry Sternbach in the Monmouth County Workforce Development Group, and another great lady who temporarily, his name escapes. They worked with Fort Monmouth to get the Fort Monmouth civilians, the government civilians, set up for jobs. So the Monmouth County pitched in, But it was a very uncertain time, very sad time, and that's how it went till the last unit, till they finally closed in September of 11. And then after that, Carol, as I did mention to you, I did become the Fort Monmouth site manager for closure. And I was fortunate enough to do that from September of 11 until this past June of 18, when I just retired from the government, with a total of 37 years, 22 and a half in uniform and 15 as a government civilian.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Carol.
It's very, very impressive.
Well, you know what? It was a great run. There are great people like you that I met, that I worked with. I've worked with civilians, not my first couple of years in active duty, but when I got to Korea, started working with civilians, Korean civilians. And from Maryland on, I got such a great appreciation for a civilian like yourself, the people I worked with on the fort, that take the pride in supporting. See, everyone supports, it's not just the guys and gals in uniform. Everybody supports the mission. And as far as people, like for what you're doing, I did want to take a moment, I hope you don't mind, to thank you on behalf of all the veterans. Excuse me. I think this project that you're doing it's a very worthwhile cause. You're not only just you're really honoring us by allowing us to tell our story, But everybody's, this helps morale. And morale is what helps the cause. And the folks you talk to, I'm sure you're talking to some people that have had just harrowing, dangerous, incredible things that they've done in combat that people should never even have to live through. You get a chance to interview them, let them tell their story. But you also have some people that hopefully, even if they spent, whether they spent 3 years in the Army, all they did was work in a basement at Fort Dix, or they spent 30 years and 3 of them were in deadly combat, like so many of my buddies in Vietnam or Fallujah, Korea, World War II, like my uncle Sam, all this, or whether they did like 20 years like me in a balance of a lot of peacetime and some harm's way, and you saw some ugly things, but you saw so many good things. All these folks that serve, their story is so viable. The friendships they made in basic training alone, and everybody, all of us, everybody did their job. Every piece of it helped the cause, because everybody had to be doing their job so we can all support the warfighter. Guys like Mike and the guys, and Don Davis, and that are up at the tip of the spear, looking at the enemy in the eye. It takes all of us. We have to help them. And it takes all of us, and the civilians too. That's why I've loved, truly loved, the civilians I've worked with. They take it serious, that they know they're doing a job to free up someone else, to be supporting the effort. Everybody supports the effort. What you're doing here, this supports the effort. This brings morale, like that family I just saw that was here. They'll go home now and talk about that. And that's morale. And we are the best military in the world, not just because of our technology, not just because of the beatings and bullets, which is, but it's also because of the attitude that our troops had, that I was shoulder to shoulder with. And the attitude of people on the sides and in front and the back, and the families, like my family, my son Eddie, my daughter Lily, my wife Fran, my dad, my mom, my stepmom's stepfather, all of my friends, they're all patriots, real patriotic people behind this cause. And they're incredible people I worked with in the reserves, holding down 2 jobs and serving their country. That's it. You can't even, I can't actually find the right words. But I wanted to tell you, it's so great that you're doing this. Because everybody's service, as long as it was honorable, as long as they left with an honorable discharge, or as long as they left under a situation, even the people that couldn't serve but wanted to, this is all just great, and you're capturing it. So, for the guys, because I told you I had lunch with a few of us, and we were talking about you. And for the group, this is just, I just appreciate this. And it's a really, this is why our country really is, as great as it is. Our military is the best. It is.
I agree. John, I want you to know that you're the 604th interviewed veteran here over a 17-year time frame of this project. And your remarks about morale really ring true for me, because after being interviewed, the veteran almost undergoes a kind of healing experience, which is beautiful to see. And also the repercussions of the interview being on the internet and possible reunions that happen after, and that the veteran never truly believed that his or her service was so much a part of him until all of this happened. So the Veteran History Project, having veterans speak about their experiences, is cathartic and healing, absolutely.
Well, I got to tell you, it's thank you. You hopefully you feel really good about what you do, because it's good.
It's my passion, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I can see that.
John, I just want to say in closing that I'm honored and humbled that you came here today to speak to me of your sacrifice and contribution that you made in service to your country. And thank you, and God bless you.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. This is great. Thank you.
Outstanding job.
Thank you.